So, welcome to Social Sessions, guys. This is the first panel podcast that we've got, and I'm very excited with the panel that we have. So, I'll start with yourself. Tommy, can you just introduce yourself and just give us a wee kind of...
Sure, Sean. Thanks for the invitation, mate. I'm Tommy Sheridan. I was brought up in Pollock, south side of Glasgow. Got involved in various campaigns as a young boy against the poll tax primarily. Through that, got involved in politics. Was elected as an MSP and was there for 8 years. I was also a local councillor in Glasgow City Chambers, not far from here. I was there for 11 years. So I've been involved in socialist politics for most of my life, Sean, and I've just recently qualified as a social worker. So I've followed the path of my two sisters and my mum, God rest her soul. So hopefully I'll be able to get gainful employment at long last.
Brilliant. Thanks for coming, Tommy. Davey, just a wee quick introduction.
Actor, director, humanitarian. I'm head of the charity Spirit Aid that is set up about 2000, run projects in Scotland, Afghanistan, Palestine and Malawi. That's it.
Perfect. Thanks for coming, Davey. Big 5-0.
My name's Jordan Robertson, stage name's Hawaii 5-0. Done a number of years in the jail, turned my back on my old life. Now I get a production company. I do a lot of social media content. I make music and I'm a full-time content creator, if I want to use that moniker.
Brilliant. Cheers, big man. Natalie.
My name's Natalie Logan. I am the CEO of Cisco, a prison-based charity, and everything I do in my life is just to reform individuals to find their best version of themselves.
Brilliant. James.
Hi, Sean. My name's James Docherty. How do I introduce myself? I've been described in all sorts of other wonderful ways.
Scottish gabber, matey.
I've still got that Scottish thing where I still got to say nice things about myself. Well, I'm set up to defend the negative things you say about me, but if you say nice things about me, I'm like, stop it. But I work in the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit, and I have a real special interest in trauma and how it plays out in our housing communities and across society as a whole. And I've been a big campaigner on the Adverse Childhood Experience movement in Scotland called ACE Aware Nation. And a big part of that work is to get people into the awareness of how relationally we need to get better at how we are with each other and how we model behaviours to our children, and how we, as the adults that surround young people, probably the best way to describe it is relational scaffolding. And if we can provide relational wealth to the young people in our communities, then they'll stop cycling towards a lot of the adversity we see. And my big challenge in my life is to get everybody to see how they get to contribute to that, and that you don't need to wait till somebody pulls a lever politically for you to have a deep sense of how you contribute to your own family system, for example, or the stuff that's happening in your own community.
Brilliant. Cheers, James. And obviously we'll touch on quite a lot of that which you went on to. So first, I'm going to start, the first topic we're going to cover is prison reform. So what I was kind of going to do was just take us back to the special unit years, and I kind of know that was somewhere where Tommy and Davey both kind of, obviously Davey played the part of Jimmy Boyle in A Sense of Freedom. So Davey, what did you think of the special unit a way back?
Well, I was really lucky because Giles Havergal, who was the artistic director of the Citizens Theatre, where I was a member for 10 years, he was invited along as part of the arts therapy. And this was in the very, very early days. I think it was the first year of the unit. And it was just an extraordinary experience walking in. You couldn't tell who were the screws, who were the cons. You just had a warm welcome. It was creative, an amazingly creative environment in there. And I was an official visitor to the special unit. I used to take rehearsals up there. We made films in there. We put on events in there. Just to see the transformation in these individuals and coming out and finding their creative expression was just thrilling to be part of.
No, I think it's, and obviously we've had you on the podcast before and we've spoke about that, and we'll go into it in more detail, but thanks for that, David. What about yourself, Tommy? What were you were kind of involved a wee bit as well with the special unit?
Sean, my involvement with the special unit specifically arose from a protest that we did over in George Square. During the anti-poll tax campaign, one of the things that the government decided to do was they were going to withdraw people's benefits. They were going to cut their benefits. So anybody that was on benefits who wasn't paying the poll tax was to get less money. And we found that appalling because benefits is already poverty level. So to take more money off somebody that's already in poverty is just shocking, obscene. So we decided to set up camp in George Square, and we set up tents and we organised a 7-day hunger strike. So we went hunger strike, just water. We'd taken medical advice and all that, so we weren't daft about it, but we had electrolyte stuff that we were allowed to drink for 7 days. And the whole thing was to highlight what the government was doing to people via the poll tax. And we collected 14,500 signatures in the 7 days that we were there. We stayed for a whole week. And while we were there, Johnny Steele come down to visit us, and he wanted to donate a sculpture that he'd done while he was in the unit, and it was a sculpture that depicted struggle, and he was moved by the fact that we were doing something, and he wanted to contribute to what we had done. As part of that, we got an invitation by Tam and Joe to go and visit the special unit, and we went afterwards to visit, and I then became quite involved thereafter with the Glasgow 2 campaign in terms of Tam and Joe's campaign, especially when I was a councillor trying to raise awareness of a conviction which quite clearly wasn't a safe conviction. It took many, many years to prove that, but it was difficult to campaign in it, I have to say, Sean. It was one of those issues that I wasn't winning popularity contests for getting involved with, because obviously when there's a heinous crime, when a wee Wayne's been burnt and killed, nobody wants to touch it.
No.
But I learned through life, whether it's the Birmingham 6, Guildford 4, the more heinous the crime, the bigger the chance of a miscarriage of justice, because there is a desire from those on the other side to get a conviction, to get revenge. Right. And that means cutting corners, and that means maybe setting up narratives that aren't true. And I think quite clearly that's what happened with the Glasgow 2. It's what happened with Guildford 4. It's what happened with Birmingham 6. So we always, as people, have to be careful. Although we're natural as humans, we have a revulsion against something that's horrible. Yeah. Just be careful. Don't jump to conclusions, because there are many facts, and some of them can be manipulated.
No, definitely. And you want to come in on that, James? Obviously, what about yourself, Natalie? Obviously, you're kind of looking at the way I'm obviously talking about a special unit, because I think it changed so many lives back then, and obviously you're a big part of the prison system in this day and age. What do you think? Do you think that's something, because it's kind of something that you are trying to do now, is bring some of that humanity back to the prisoners and stuff?
I think we almost regurgitated the kind of ethos behind the special unit. I was really keen to meet up with people for the special unit, because I was keen, like, now we understand trauma and we've got a better understanding of being trauma informed and trauma responsive and how we should be treating people. But back then they had that insight without all the stuff that we have now. So I was really keen to get an understanding of their model, because that's everything that we want to mirror, is about these people in prisons are human beings. Yep. Like, we've already took away their dignity, their liberty. Like, we don't know what path they came for, yet we put them in, we punish them more. We ask them to be better people, but we put them with hundreds of criminals. So they're going to learn how to be a better criminal or to commit a different crime. They're in there, they're absolutely traumatised by their childhood. So of course they're going to use substances. They need to escape for themselves. So we're trying to regurgitate an environment that, one, is safe enough for them to come in and say, my life is shit. This is what happened in my childhood. I grew up in adversity, poverty. Safe enough to do that. Also a place that they can get really, really vulnerable and they can come in and heal. So that's what we try to do. It's about giving them, see, the bottom line is, men and women in prison know what the problem is. Right. So they know their own solution. They know that housing's an issue, DWP is an issue, they can't get access to their children. They know that. So they already know the solutions are, if I can stop using alcohol and drugs, I'll get access to my children. If I get access to my children, my self-esteem is going to improve, my confidence is going to improve. James, very early on, I spoke about parenting workshops, and James went, don't call it a parenting workshop, Natalie, call it attachment workshops, because if you say to somebody you need to go to a parenting workshop, you're insinuating they're a shit parent.
Aye.
Don't do that. Say it's attachment workshops. So we say, come to attachment workshops, learn how to be the best version of a father that you should be. So what conversation should you be having with your daughter? Like, what does your daughter like? What do you like? So it's about regurgitating what they try to do or what they've done in the special unit, but in this climate, because we have new drug trends, we're living in a very different world that's driven by social media. So it's about getting in and just being human beings and showing people in prison that they're also a human being, because they don't feel like that. They just feel like a number, a label, a drag on society, and they're not. They're actually beautiful people behind the surface.
No, and I think obviously I've done some work with Natalie, and I obviously can see that the protest it's a beautiful place, and anybody that kind of wants to kind of see more should definitely look into Natalie's work at Cisco. Jordan, you've obviously a bit younger and stuff like that, but we done a podcast with Johnny Steele, who Tommy was talking about earlier. What do you think of prison reform? Do you think the special unit ethos, as Natalie said, is something that we should be bringing in back to the kind of prison system?
It's an odd question in my opinion, because it's a different time. If you look at, like Sir Johnny Steele we were talking about earlier, he went through the cages into the special unit. He represented a type of prisoner that you don't often see these days, somebody that's constantly battling against the authorities. And maybe you do get instances where people will rebel, but my experience is when I see somebody that maybe smashes up their cell, or they cause some sort of antisocial behaviour in the hall, it's usually because they're rattling or they've not been able to get some spice. You can tell by looking at it. I remember being in the jail in 2016. It was mainly Subutex. That was like the main drug. A wee bit of hash here and there, depending. Then I went in and it was like about 5 years later I went in, and spice had really taken over. I didn't really have much experience with people taking spice. I'd heard stories, somebody said they tried it and this kind of thing. But when I went back in, I was suddenly I was taken aback, but it was like, I felt like I was in an institution. I almost had that feeling like, have I been sectioned here and I just don't know? Because I was looking, the way people were talking, the things they were talking about, I was like, everybody's fried here. I just couldn't put my finger on it. And people were arguing the screws, and that way you could just see it in them. I was like, what's going on here? And the penny dropped. It's like the spice. That was just, it really impacted people's mental health. So the likes of nowadays, it's like, would the special unit work? Do we have prisoners? How would we identify who goes into a special unit? Because if we look at your likes of Jimmy Boyle, Johnny Steele and that kind of thing, they probably fit into that 1% of prisoners that you hear a lot about, like your Charles Bronson-esque prisoners, know what I mean? They fit into that 1% where the system just can't control them no matter where they put them. They always wreak havoc. But nowadays it's like, I feel there isn't really so much for what I've experienced in the Scottish prisons. It's a much of a 1%, but there's probably over 50% of people that are no in that case or wherever you put them, they'll wreak havoc, but they still wreak havoc for time and time again. So how big do you want to make the special unit? Because it's hard to narrow it down to target these people. And when you look at it, a lot of these people's issues are drug related. You know what I mean? There's no very often the people that are just rebellious in nature. You know what I mean?
I think obviously if you're taking it, I'll let James maybe come in this, because obviously we're looking more at trauma-informed stuff, we're looking at ACEs and stuff like that. Maybe something that wasn't back then at the special unit. They think as a rising prison population, we've got a chance here with HMP Glasgow. Do you think that we should be looking at more trauma-informed stuff then, James? Do you think that's the key?
If they took the learning for the special unit, then they wouldn't be building a 1,000-bed prison in the first place. So if you look at, like, even though there's drug trends and there's different, like, society throws up different dynamics all the time, but the human condition never changes, and human beings have got fundamental needs, and if their needs don't get met, then it creates trauma, and a trauma response is rebellion or defiance against perceived injustice. So you'll always have people kicking back at that, but part of the problem is what they do is they diagnose the individual rather than diagnosing the relationships and the context of the environment that surrounds them.
Aye.
And it's why I'm always saying that if you want to put the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act in its proper context, then you need to stop building prisons that hold 1,000 people and create smaller units that meet the fundamental human needs that people have lacked and that cycle them into the system in the first place. So, for example, if you think about putting 1,000 people in an environment where you've got unresolved trauma, and the evidence is glaring that the justice system's entrenched with unresolved trauma, and addiction is an attempt at a solution for trauma. So if you focus on the drug, then the drug becomes a problem, which is symptomatic of deeper seated troubles.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the times I was up, for example, I was up at Natalie's, I think it was the first year when you ran the recovery cafe. Now the recovery cafe is small in a large context in a prison, and what's happening is people in there are getting their needs met,
mm-hmm.
and they're getting seen and known for the first time. So if you think about it, prison's a loss of liberty, but it shouldn't be a loss of humanity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's what we forgot, that most people in prison are coming home, but the purpose of the prison shouldn't be to return people home, it should be to return them to themselves,
Yes.
who they were meant to be in the first place before drugs.
The true definition of
trauma.
rehabilitation, basically.
Exactly. And if you want to put it in its proper context, then look at the Scandinavian countries. They aren't building mass incarceration. They aren't looking at privatising the system.
No.
They create the units in a context where it's small enough to do the therapeutic work. And that's all the special unit done. They done the therapeutic inputs that allowed people to be seen and known. And what happened? They
People
stopped going on the
flourished.
roof. They stopped taking people hostage.
Aye.
And these were some of the most frosty characters in the justice system.
Mm-hmm.
But it was largely about unmet need. And if you give them trust, empowerment, their self-efficacy back, their autonomy, then they'll manage the place.
I agree. And obviously, looking at the special unit, obviously it's looking at two different times in 5. You're probably right, there is a kind of difference. So I'll just kind of open the floor to anybody that kind of... Mental health's a big thing. We've got overcrowding. We've got, and I mean, I was talking to Davey earlier about how Norway works and how there's actually, to become a prison officer, you need to do a degree in being a prison officer. And they have a very low, I think, 18% reoffending rate. So what do you think the difference is? I mean, Addiewell do 6 weeks of training and you're flung right into a hall. And you're talking about you can be 18 years of age and be flung into a hall, a main Cat A hall. So there's a huge difference there. So, I mean, what do you kind of think? How do we go about even trying to start to reform such a broken system?
I think what the points that James has made is very, very apt, because he's touched on so many different aspects of life. And I think this whole prison reform question is impossible to look at in isolation.
Yeah.
Because it's like using an analogy that hopefully gets people to understand. You wouldn't go to play a game of golf with one club in your bag. You go and play a game of golf, you've got several clubs in your bag. And prison reform, you better have several clubs, because you've used the Scandinavian countries as an example and what they do. Well, they've got less people in the prisons. They've got less crime. Why? Because they're less unequal. Yep. You look at Denmark, Norway, Sweden.
Society,
so when you've got injustice, inevitably you'll have inequality. And we are one of the most unequal societies in the whole of the Western world. Well, the reason we have so much poverty, in my opinion, is because of the lack of distribution of wealth, fair distribution of wealth. So people can't get a fair crack at it. People can't get a wee share of the apple pie and motherhood that everybody wants, because it's so unequally shared. Because all the stuff we've talked about with the special unit, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So when you've got a pie that's supposed to be very, very small and it has to be divided between the health service and education, and then somebody comes up and says, by the way, what we really need to do is we need to invest in prison reform. We need to have rehabilitation. We need to spend money on psychologists, psychiatrists. We need to have a training program so that people get trained in there. And somebody says, oh, how much is that costing? Oh, I'm sorry, but the health service and education comes first. and therefore it's all interconnected. If you don't give people options when they're inside, if you don't give them a chance, I remember being in Berlin. I mean, the forklift training course was oversubscribed because loads of the boys wanted to go and learn how to drive a forklift. Why? Because they thought they could get a job afterwards. The roofing, they used to have a roofing programme. Everybody wanted to do the roofing programme. Why? Because they thought they could get a job. So it's not as if there's no desire in there to improve themselves. But the options, the courses were empty because they didn't have the training officers coming in. Why did they know the training officers? They didn't have the budget. It's all interconnected. So personally, Sean, I think changing society and having a more equal distribution of the massive wealth that we've got is fundamental to all these questions.
No, I totally agree, 100%. And I think just when I mean, poverty, it's I always say it's quite an easy sum when you look at poverty, and then basically the cost of living rises, poverty rises, crime rises. It's quite an easy sum. It's pretty easy. But what do you think then? How do we go? This guy Timson's come in. I think this guy could be quite good. I don't know what you guys think. I've read into him a wee bit. Does any of you kind of know anything more about him?
Wee bit.
You've just got to hope that he does a lot. He does a lot for, we know that he already does a lot for prisoners, but you just need to, here's my problem when it comes politically, that we don't have ministers in a post long enough to even get a really comprehensive understanding about what the problem is. So we will have a justice minister that moves on every few years, so they don't have a comprehensive understanding about what is going on in justice. So we've just got this old, rhetorical, shitty system that's systematically set up to fail the poor. Like it is, because like you said, Tommy, we feed the pockets of the people that are already rich. We align their pockets. Like, poverty and disadvantage are never going to get money, so people are always going to go to prison because, like James said, we're traumatised individuals. We're met by our environments, and our environments are not typically good. But my issue is we get justice ministers in and we think, oh my God, just maybe they're speaking a wee bit of sense, they're doing the right stuff, they look as if they're busy, and then before you know it, they change and you get a transport minister that's moving into justice. So that's very frustrating when you're embedded in this work and you're passionate and I've been championing this for years, as you know, Sean, like really, really championing, not even about prison, about people, like giving people a break, seeing people, valuing people. And I just think at government, they'll come and it's very tokenistic because they'll come in and they'll sit in our room and they'll listen to our narrative, but they don't hear. No. They don't hear, and the civil servants will continue to feed the same regurgitated stuff that feeds again their narrative to continue this same system with overpopulated prisons, people that are on spice, this change in drug trend that we can't even deal with because it's not been out long enough. So we don't know how to cognitively support people in prison anymore. But all we can do is provide a space and say, we'll give you a safe space to come and heal. But I think that Scottish Government and Westminster, all governments, really need to have a look at how long their ministers are in a post for to get a comprehensive understanding of what it is that's going on and what they're championing and what they're fighting for. Like, we're all sitting campaigning and championing for something in a room because we've got a comprehensive understanding and a passion. Maybe they should try and wear our shoes.
I totally agree. What do you think, Jordan? What's your kind of look on the kind of the guy Timson that came in? Do you know much about him?
See, to be honest, mate, I'm going to just say it how it is. I didn't even know who won the election till like 2 days after it. See, politics, I used to be right invested in it with independence and that. Still pro-independence, man, but see, it's like, right, Tories, they're terrible for the poor, they hate Scotland, all that. That's the kind of the ideas that are in your head then. So who do you vote for? It's like, Labour, they're just the exact same. It's like, I kind of learned to just detach myself with politics. It's like, I really understood the meaning of the phrase ignorance is bliss, because it really is. See, when you start to get invested in this stuff, it just fucking angers you. And then you feel, where I come from, working class area, I kind of try and look at, right, what's the problem around me? See, for any effective change to be had, in my opinion, it needs to be grassroots. You know what I mean? It's like, we can look to the powers that be to do it, but how much effective change do they actually make? I don't know. In my short experience of life, Fuck all. I've not really seen much. I've not really seen. I can't remember. I don't think I've ever met an MP or like an MSP or anything like in person. Like one time, unless it's elections. You know what I mean? It's like we talk about this. It's like they care about the poor. They care about the working class when they need their vote. When they've got their vote, they're just like you see the back of their head at a distance. You know what I mean? Because they're running off into the sunset, and that's probably my opinion of it. So I just learned to focus on what I can control. Where can I help, and where can where can I be effective? And my effectiveness lies in what can I do for my local community, and hopefully that does spread out with social media, where we can spread a positive message and we can connect with a lot of people that are in the same circumstance as well. But I feel when Natalie's saying it's like it's feeling listened to. Nobody feels listened to, or if there is any change, it's like we've got all these issues, but we'll maybe try and put a bit of work here. It feels like a lot of the time there's just a distrust, in my opinion. So I've just kind of recently I've just started to just detach myself all these things, because a lot of time I've sat and dwelled on it for too long, and maybe things in my personal life is where I've blamed it. All right, this is shit, and the Tories that they blame, and this and that. That's the kind of realm of thinking I find myself wandering into, and now I've just learned to just detach myself and just focus on what's in front of me and what's within my control.
No, and I think when you were in, Davey, when we were doing Shooters, which was one of my favourite projects in prison, the glaring thing that came out of that was you guys showed people humanity. And you know, we've spoken about it before, how many people didn't want to be in front of a camera, and that was a big thing in a prison. Slow walking, all that kind of stuff, and taking people out their comfort zone. And as Tommy was saying earlier about the kind of creating jobs, not as soon as you show somebody that they can do something and maybe individualise. But I mean, what happened with projects like Shooters again, Davey? Probably down to money again. Like they weren't able to kind of fund that process of going back in again.
We need money for the prisons to do it. Sean, that was it. And the money dried up, which was a real shame, because I thought we were making a big difference to prisoners' lives, allowing them to express themselves creatively through the use of film, through writing scripts, through operating a camera or sound or directing or whatever. It was, you were part of it. You loved that experience, didn't you?
Loved that.
Very, very special. And you saw men, particularly men, coming out of their shells and just transforming it into beautiful human beings.
Mm-hmm. And it was the way everybody was like, I'm the way to take part in that, and then everybody started going, all right, I'll be the guy on the phone and all that, and it was like everybody all kind of changed. So what about you, James? What do you think? I always look to you as like how the best way to kind of, because there is a problem with people, we look at prisons and it's very much the impoverished scheme, people that are 99% of the prison population. Yeah. And how do we get people to, is it a societal problem, do you think?
Well, prison isn't a vote winner at the end of the day. And I don't know if you've noticed, but Scotland's quite a punitive society. It's like, hammer them and make sure they don't do it again, and give them breathing water. Why are they getting a telly in their cell and all that? And a lot of it's to do with the lack of education and awareness, I think. And that's why I've been so vocal about the trauma in our culture, because when you understand human suffering, human beings are naturally compassionate, because compassion's born out of suffering a lot of the time, and people don't see it. That's why when they make an appointment, like the guy for Timson's in a day, he's a very compassionate human being, but his life's totally abstract to the lived experience of the people in the prison who's going to be making decisions over. Mm-hmm. So who's going to be his advisors? Who's going to be the people that say to him, that'll probably not work, and here's the reason why it will not work, and here's what does work? And even though he's got lots of hard-won experience in employing people, because he employs people with convictions, which is massive, because you need more conviction-friendly employers who can say, right, it's done, that part of your life's done, this is the new chapter. And that's the way it needs to be, because you should never be defined by the mistakes you've made in the past. If we are doing that to human beings, then it says more about us as a society or an individual than it does anything else. And I'm a massive fan of employment. Why? Because most trauma's worked out in the community. It isn't sitting in front of the specialist therapist who's going to do EMDR or person-centred counselling. And we've got a tendency as systems to fall into the traps as well. Or if it's trauma, it needs a specialised intervention. Like, no, always. If you look at probably a high percentage of the people sitting in this room, most of us have been fixing our wounds while we're moving for years. And it's been worked out in community, and it's worked out in relationship. It's never worked out in isolation, because you can't... We heal in relationship. What happens when you get a job? So I've worked with young people for years.
Purpose, isn't it?
Gang fighting, recreational gang fighting, hitting each other with a machete on a Tuesday and a Wednesday night. And then they get a job, and it almost ceases overnight because they've stepped into a place where they've got opportunity. They've got ready-made role models usually in the job. They've got an old hand who understands probably what it's like to grow up in a scheme, who's coming in and pulling the wee guy out of his bed in the morning saying, get to work, where otherwise you might not be able to be getting that because he's got an absent father, for example.
Aye.
So there's so many dynamics to employment that if they understand the plight of these young people, then they become the substitute attachment figures, and that happens in the process of healing. And I would love everybody to know that. And obviously, making the guy for Timson's the Minister for Prisons, is it virtue signalling? I don't know. I'm sceptical enough at this stage in my life where I live in hope, I operate in hope, but I'm an optimistic sceptic because I've seen it. I've seen the virtue signalling appointment so many times where it doesn't make the shift that our society needs. So I'll wait and see.
So, it's obviously, Tommy, you know how this kind of works with justice ministers and stuff like that, and how quickly it can change. Maybe even like one crime can change. Like, you were part of the kind of, obviously the part where it was the gang culture, which James was talking about, the knife crime and the gang culture. How hard was that to navigate as a politician when you've got a system there that you know is broken, but you need to keep the people on side? How hard is that?
I found it very, very difficult because I was on both sides of the equation. I used to be a young boy hanging about in Pollock. We played football in the street. We hung about closes. I was fortunate in that I hung about with boys that all wanted to be reasonably fit. We all wanted to be footballers. So we didn't sniff a glue. We didn't go for a bucky. We didn't dabble in any drugs. We chased the lassies and we wanted to be footballers. So my upbringing therefore was in a scheme, but it was in some of the positive parts of a scheme. Mm-hmm. But a couple of my mates weren't so lucky. You know, I always remember Tam McGurnfey, Pollock, high in the glue, thought he could walk in water, drowned. Glue was a big thing in my day. People look back at it now and like, oh, fuck's sake, you know, Chris Pope with glue in it, who would do that? That was big when I was growing up. So I lived that experience. But see, when I was a counsellor, I had pensioners coming to me saying that there was boys hanging about the close and that they were frightened. Yeah. And could I do something about it? And so there you go. I was that soldier and now I'm having to deal with what is a perceived problem. And I tried via my community work, because I'm taking with what Jordan's saying about grassroots, community centres, community work, youth work. What's the first thing to go when a local authority cuts its budget? Right. Youth work, community work. Mm-hmm. And yet it is such a false economy, because you get rid of the youth work, you get rid of the community work, and crime goes up because young people have got nowhere to go. Right. They all want to get together, they want to have fun. We were all young once. What we have to do as adults is try and have enough people influencing that fun that it's no violent fun, that it's no attacking people, it's no putting other people in fear. And sometimes explaining that, because every young person's got a granny or a granda. So if you get them to think about, well, what are you doing? Is it going to frighten such and such? It can work. We dealt with a lot of stuff that was happening in Pollock at the time. We dealt with it. We managed to cut down a lot of the gang boundaries and things like that. But one of the big issues in it, this is probably more controversial and it probably won't get universal support in the panel. It's a bit like this golf analogy I was talking about in the clubs in the bag. because one of the clubs that I think we've got to use is the drugs laws. I think they're just shite. I think the drugs laws are shite. And the day that we continue to say to somebody that's smoking a spliff, you're a criminal, but if you want to try this bucky or this brandy or this whiskey, no problem, that's legal. It's just fucking rubbish. And to me, if you look at prison, how many are drug-related prisoners? And when I say drug-related, I don't just mean addiction. I mean getting involved in territory, making a bit of pay for yourself because you're doing a wee bit of dealing, and then somebody moves into your turf, and before you know it, you're having to fight. Personally, one thing I would do if I was the Minister for Justice is change the drug laws, because I would legalise everything. I would legalise everything. I would regulate everything so that people knew what they were buying, and I would tax it. And the money that we would raise for it, I'd put it into rehabilitation and addictions, because people are going to get addicted to these drugs anyway. People are addicted to alcohol. It's legal. People are addicted to alcohol. People are using tobacco. It's legal. But the idea that you make it criminal because you want some, it might be coke, it might be hash, you make it criminal. Well, as soon as you make it criminal, somebody's going to supply it in a criminal network, and you build it up. For fuck's sake, if we can't learn anything from Prohibition in America, then we're just daft. What did Prohibition in America do? It gave rise to the mafia and to gang networks, and they became all powerful. So personally, I know not everybody agrees with me, because some people say drugs are horrible, why should you make it easier? And my reply to that is, if somebody's going to try drugs, they're going to try them, whether it's legal or not. I'd much rather you can go to a shop and buy something and you know that it's regulated, that it's actually hash you're buying and it's no fucking shoe polish that's been rubbed in with it. So personally, I think that's one step that we should be taking, and it's to take on the big powers that be and say, fuck your hypocrisy, we're changing the drug laws.
I think when you look at big pharma and stuff like that, they're kind of legalised drug cartels anyway. When you look at the big pharma and stuff like that, James, I know you'll probably disagree with that to a certain extent. I would partly, I think I would legalise most drugs. I've listened to you, and you always manage to sway my mind and things. What would be the reasons you wouldn't legalise it?
Well, if you look at people in prison for violence, mate, the correlation between violence and alcohol is off the scale, and violence is legal. But you don't go to the jail for taking drugs, alcohol being a drug. You go to the jail for your behaviour on it, and you need consequences. Human beings are set up naturally to have consequences for behaviour, because you don't just get to do what you want. What makes people more vulnerable to participate in antisocial behaviour is easy access to things like alcohol. And if you make it easier to get drugs without addressing the causes and conditions as to the reasons why people take drugs in the first place, then you still create another unintended consequence. For me, it needs to go back further to how we raise our children, because the vulnerability to addiction comes in the person. Not everybody that takes a drug becomes addicted. Why is it there's a small percentage of people that do? And that small percentage are who makes up the prison system. I do agree that it shouldn't be criminalised. It shouldn't be criminalised for getting caught with a wee bit of that, a bit of this, a bit of that. I do believe that there should be hope of victory of your circumstances. For example, the disclosure system, for example. How hard it is to go to an employer and say, I used to be a drug addict and I'm so long off it and blah, blah, blah. The shame attached to that is unbelievable. There needs to be a lever that can be pulled, or a process where you can go in and get your conviction shelved, where if you've been in addiction and in pursuit of that addiction, it's brought you into conflict with the law, and if you manage to get recovery, you should be able to go through a process where you're able to say, I don't need to disclose that when you're going looking for a job, because it's no longer an issue in your life. But it is dead complex, but they believe human beings need consequences for their behaviour. If you legalise drugs in this society the now. We're one of the most traumatised cultures in Europe. If you legalise drugs and make it easy accessible into a traumatised culture without addressing that, what do you think's going to happen?
No, and that's where I honestly, I'm really torn between it. I'm really torn, and I'll put it to you three guys that, like, you, anyone who can come in, Davey, Jordan, Natalie, like obviously two sides of the coin there. What do you think?
I was lucky enough to be filming in Canada last year where they've legalised cannabis. You can go to your cannabis shops, you walk in, it's like a chemist. All lovely pastel colours, green and pink and all the rest of it. You can buy all your paraphernalia. You can go up and you can get a ready rolled pack of 5, ready rolled pack of 10 joints. If you want, you can buy it loose. All these pensioners were in there, getting their weekly bag of dope. They were young single mas pushing prams, getting their bit of dope. So many people are making money from it. The government are making money from it. The growers are making money from it. It's a no-brainer. The money's going back into society. And it's taken all the shit off the streets and legalised it, and it seems to be working. But can I tell you a story about one of the countries I work in, my charity works in, is Malawi. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. Mainly you've got illiterate peasant farmers. That's the economy is based on. If a young person breaks, steals something or gets into trouble, the parents take them to the now we've got 10 villages of about 15,000 people. Each village has got a chief. Half of them are women, which is great. So if you've got a teenager who's going wrong, they take him to the chief and explain. The chief will then pass on his or her judgment. If the kid doesn't clean up their act, they go to the senior chief. That's the one in charge of all the 10 chiefs. The senior chief passes on his or her wisdom. If the kid doesn't behave himself, they go to the district chief. That's somebody who's in charge of like 150 or whatever tribes. If that fails, they're then handed over to the justice system. I've been working in Malawi since 2008. That's like, 16 years? One teenager was handed over to the criminal justice system. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely brilliant.
Totally
So
agree.
it's society that are keeping the kids out of the fucking prisons.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's their peers that, that are there. It's their grannies and their grandads, and they all respect their chiefs. It's an extraordinary sense of social justice that we just don't have. Mm-hmm. They don't punitively punish people.
What's your take on it, Jordan?
I think what the problem is as well, to further what David's saying, I think we're seeing communities being dissolved, and I think that's just the era we're moving into. We're moving into social media where people are becoming more antisocial because at the touch of your phone you can message somebody, you can call somebody. There's no real need to leave your house, really. I remember being younger in the community centre was where we would kick about, just hang around outside, and you get the people coming out to talk to you, they're always quite sound. And I think being at that age, usually when you're kicking about, and it's understandable looking back in retrospect, see when you're young, you're kicking about in trackies and like there's a gang of you, you might not be up to any good, but usually anybody that approaches you of a senior age is either usually the police, somebody telling you, listen, you better get fucked the policeman, phoned at somebody in an aggressive manner. So you always I felt that approach that way. So when somebody did approach you and they were actually being sound, asking what you're up to, just know there to challenge you in any way. It was allows you to drop your guard and then open up. And then there was places like the community centre I hung about in Penally for a period, and you'd go in like a Thursday night, play pool, play the computer, just kick about. So you were off the street, and then they would also run like a weekly bus to like Nethercraigs. That was like an array of football pitches just at Hardridge, just up next to Pollock. And you go there every Thursday and play football. I couldn't have kicked my own arse, but I went. You know what I mean? Because it was good. It was good to go and have a laugh and that. And it was that way as well, because we used to gang fight. Pure no, in my experience, because we hated the other scheme. Obviously, hatred eventually developed, but it's just for something to do because you had nothing else to really do. There was no availability of much resource, and then, as you say, the community centres, they get less funding, and when they get less funding, as Tommy says, these are the first activities and things that get pulled, and you just go back, you revert back to type, you're kicking about with your pals and that, and just, you're up to no good, because human beings, you need stimulation. It's like, it's wired into our DNA, like, for up to, like, even a couple of hundred years ago, you had to get up, you were stimulated to survive, you had to hunt, you had to work, you had to do whatever. But it's like in recent times, probably in the past 100 years, where you're grown up to through your adolescence, where you've no got that pressure to survive, because there's certain needs that are met for the most part, where you're fed, you've got like a schooling system that you've got a plan, you've not got a demand to go and get a job right away because by law you need to go to school to a certain age and that kind of thing. So you have got a lot of time where you need to fill the gaps. And there's some people that are lucky that they find themselves in positions where they find music, they find acting, or they find some sort of creative endeavour. Some people find doing paper rounds and that, and then it transcends into working part-time jobs. But that wasn't my experience. And growing up, I didn't know many people that had that experience as well. Because I always wondered that, like, how is so many people hanging about in groups and gangs, and it's still quite prevalent, you know what I mean? It's still happening. It's no change. So even though society's changing in terms of technology, in terms of politically and all these kind of things, it's still these things just aren't moving with the times. And why is that? And it's trying to get to the root of the issue. And with the drugs legalisation thing, I do appreciate the fact that like drugs are illegal, they're still accessible. So it's that thing that's like, why not just let people take what they want? But then, as James saying, it's like it's still not meeting the needs. Then if you normalise it, as you say, like I can understand like with weed, we can argue like certain drugs are worse than others. But as James says, it's the behaviour as a result of the drugs. There's some people will smoke a joint, go to work and be the most placid, laid back person ever. Some people will smoke a joint and smash up your house, just go into psychosis, you know what I mean? It's just, it depends what certain drugs can bring out, certain aspects of somebody's mental health, maybe that's underlying and that kind of thing. So that's going to that root cause. But if you do legalise it, then it's kind of normalising it to a degree, right? Like you're allowed to take drugs, so what's the problem? But it's a sticky issue because you can see there's a lot of points for and a lot of points against, and I agree with both. So I think the main point is trying to bypass looking through the drugs as the issue and looking at the real underlying issue and trying to kind of solve that.
Yeah, you only need to look at, if you look at what they done in Oregon, they piloted safe supply. You weren't criminalised, you were allowed to do what you wanted in a certain part of Oregon, and it's been an unremitting disaster because people don't use, and what's happened is it gets concentrated drug users into the one area because they know they can get down there and basically use with impunity. But there's never using with impunity anyway because there's always social consequences to it. And it's like, for me, it goes right back to it's relational poverty. So if you take the funding out of a community that meant that there was a type of relational scaffolding that was wrapped around the most disadvantaged Waynes who weren't getting like the stuff that you take for granted. If you grow up in a healthy family system, you've got a mum and dad setting boundaries and expectations and how to be in relationship. But if you've got a mum and dad struggling with their mental health or who's got an unresolved addiction or your dad's in and out of jail, then a type of modelling's getting took place. But if you've got a mentor in a community centre or a football coach or a good boxing coach, he becomes like the ready-made replacement because we're creatures of attachment. We're designed by nature to orientate in social groups. And it's why I used to say to the violence reduction unit in the early days with the police, I used to say, stop telling young people to leave their gang if they can't join your one, because you're a gang.
Aye.
And the police would be like, I never thought about it that way. And you're basically telling young people to socially dislocate themselves into isolation. You need to work with the group. You need to understand the psychology of being in a gang. And it's the same as for the drug issue in our society. You need to understand the psychology of addiction. And I understand it well because I lived it. I lived inside it for a while. And obviously being on the other side of it and being in a long-term process of recovery, I can look back on my life and go, wow, no wonder it wasn't going well at certain periods, and no wonder it did go well when I was provided certain relational, they call it social contagion theory. You need to get up beside it to catch it. It's the same if you want to be a good actor. You need to be up beside other good actors and watch how they do it. If you want to be a good politician, you need to be in that environment. You don't learn how to be good at something unless you're exposed to that relational wealth. So the solution for me is, how do we provide the relational wealth that people are lacking?
I'm smiling, James, because you've used an oxymoron there, a good politician.
I know.
What made the change for you?
Being exposed, so relational wealth. So people say to me, I had Rona Mackay, who's an STV journalist, said to me, is it know that there's just something special about you, James? And I said, no, I can't subscribe to that, because even though there was desire in me and a degree of willingness to make change for the better, if I wasn't exposed to the people who I consider special, then I wouldn't be sitting in this chair today, because it was that dose response, a relationship, that orientated me into a different way of being in the world. And all the desistance research backs that up, all the recovery research backs that up, and all the social contagion theory backs it up as well. It basically says that the more healthy relationships you surround yourself with, the better the outcomes, and that's for children all the way to adulthood. It's why our old grannies used to say to us, if you fly with the fucking crows, you'll get caught, you'll get shot with the crows. They were describing social contagion theory. Tommy was describing his social group as a boy. He's surrounded with young people, and there's people on the cusp of it, on the edge, who get sucked into the using drugs. But what I would argue is that they were vulnerable to addiction in the first place, because there had been stuff going on in their life in the background that was unseen and unknown. And that creates the vulnerability that when you use a substance, in Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, they've got a brilliant statement in the literature that says, alcoholics drink because they like the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once with a few drinks. But it doesn't, that describes something, doesn't explain it. Mm-hmm. Why is a person at dis-ease and discomfort in the first place? That's the bit that interests me. And that's the bit that correlates with all the large-scale trauma research. It's basically saying that when people land in your service, Natalie, for example, the people you met in prison, the people you've met, the people I've met, no doubt in my mind the people you have met as well, when you get to know them, they start reporting to you a background, adverse childhood experiences. Poverty is an adverse childhood experience, but it's not in the original ACEs study. Mm-hmm. Being a refugee is an adverse childhood experience, because if you have to go to another country, you've been socially dislocated, but people don't talk about social dislocation as a trauma. And for me, the solution and what enabled me to turn my life around in hindsight was the incremental dose response of healthy relationships. I was gave opportunity. It was never that I had a lack of aspiration or hope. It was that I had a lack of opportunity, and people understood my plight, gave me opportunities. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm dead vocal about the need for rehabilitation that you were talking about earlier on, Tommy, where you would put the money. Because I had to be removed from my community at one point. This is how dysfunctional I was. I went to a residential rehab, and I was so full of shame that I was trapped in addiction that it was more socially acceptable for me to say to my girlfriend at the time, see if your mum and ask for a ma, tell them I'm in the jail. It was like more socially acceptable for me to be in the jail. So it would look like I was walking out the jail, mm-hmm. like something out of Carlito's Way, and I'd turned it round and I was reinvigorated and rehabilitated. But I went into a rehabilitation centre in the Borders, a place called Castle Craig, which doesn't get funded now by Scottish Government, which is a tragedy. So if I had to be navigating the same dilemma today, I'd have been cut off for that type of professional support in a safe environment. So being able to be going for... So growing up, you'll know yourself, you're in a housing scheme, you're in conflict with the law, and you're involved in territorial gang violence, and you're involved in this and that, and in conflict, then it ramps up your stress response. And the more stress you are, the more vulnerable you are to using drugs. So it was almost impossible for me in my environment how much I wanted to stop. I hated it. I didn't want to be doing what I was doing. And it wasn't until...
What age were you at this time?
27. It wasn't until I got into rehab, and in hindsight, looking back, that it almost switched off that. Have you ever seen a rabbit when it comes out its hole? Its ears go up. Its ears go up because it feels hunted. That's what it felt like for me in my community. I had a wounded stress response and I didn't know it. And it wasn't until I was in a safe environment, I was able to switch it off enough to get regulated into the cortex, and I was able to redirect and basically reassess where my life was at, and I actually apply the solution. So even that was a type of relational wealth. And then by extension of that into the community, then incrementally, It's moved me to where I'm all the day. So I know through my own experience what works, but I also know through the evidence, through the education I've had, what backs up my experience. So it's almost as if my knowledge and my experience dovetail together. So they're able to be combined. And that's why I think guys like Tommy should be in places like social work, because they're combining their experience and their knowledge, and it's like a superpower. And there isn't enough people occupying systems and services who have got lived experience of the problems that they're trying to solve. Most it's theoretical, it's no lived, which are two different types of psychology or learning.
I think it's really, see, when I was doing research, when I was researching for this today, I was looking at the cities with the most crime. In Glasgow, Naples and Marseille are massively ahead of other cities in Europe for crime. Glasgow's right up there. And it's interesting to see they're three very rich countries. And again, as Tommy was talking about, it's like the distribution of wealth. Natalie, you work in the prisons. Do you see a lot of people coming in for Bearsden, Mulgai and places like this?
Do you know, it's often a running joke, because I'll say put your hands up if you're for Bearsden, Mulgai, and we laugh about it, and for me what you said, it was dead important, because I think we've got wee countries around the world where communities hold each other responsible, and Springburn and Poso, and when I grew up back in the 70s, early 80s, communities held each other responsible. Like within your community, everybody held each other responsible. And I remember when heroin came in, and one of the big players says, you're not bringing smack into this community. You can take it anywhere else, but you will not bring smack into this community. And I remember smack didn't get coming into Springburn for a long, long time until it came in because the powers that be. But communities aren't holding each other responsible anymore. So we've got young team just running about, and I tell you what, in prison now, if you've got the young team school and the young team, you've got absolute catastrophe because it's just dog eat dog. So what we've done with the systems, and again, this is the systems that be, is we take all the OGs out the prison, right? So all the guys that have got role model prisoners, all your OGs, we take them out of the prison, and it's just all the young team school and the young team. So you've got catastrophe schooling, catastrophe. And when we get them, we try to bring them into an environment where we want to nurture them into a whole person. Well, our statistics at Cisco is we can't contain people around about the age of 27 to 30. We absolutely cannot contain them. They're not ready to admit they're an addict or alcoholic. They're still caught up in the bravado of criminal behaviours. You take them to meetings and they're not ready to identify in a fellowship because they think it's a cult. So we've not, many other services might be able to, but we can't contain under 30-year-olds because the culture that I'm getting into now is an environment where it's the young team school and the young team. And the outcomes are not going to be good for that, because we need individuals like Tommy getting into prison, David taking these fantastic courses. We've got Gemma that does the drama in Cisco. And that's one way that I watch people being elevated out of their existence into something else. Because it's like you said at first, we'll go in and say we're going to do drama, and at first they'll go, I'm not doing drama. I'm not going to act like that. No danger, am I doing that? So I will. Then they'll see the guy next to them doing it, and then they'll go, right, well, I'll just take that wee part then that's only... And then before you know it, they're wanting to take the big part, they're wanting the big main part. You know, because what we've done is we've seen them, we've heard them, we've validated them, we're speaking by their first name, we're cuddling them, like...
I suppose that goes to what James talked about, social contagion. Again, it's like just... if you had said to me when I first went 2005, 2006 for I went shots, if you told me that I would be slow walking up and down a prison or dancing about in a circle, I would have told you you're off your head. I'd have said it's never going to happen. And it's all about Eddie Gorman told when I was talking to Eddie, it's about smashing your ego. It's about shattering your ego and building it back up. Jordan, you probably were in prison kind of the least. What do you kind of see there? Like, obviously taking everything that other people say, do you see that anything that can correlate with what the guys are saying?
Well, see, if you look at a scheme, right, we'll use this as a kind of analogy, but see if you look at a scheme, who's the main role models in like a scheme or a poor housing area?
Your gangsters and your...
Aye, the people we were talking about earlier, people that stab the most people, that sell the most drugs, that's driving the biggest motors, it's usually negative role models. And as you say, when you pull it back, when you really get to know these characters, they'll unconsciously, if they do even reveal, which they seldom do, they'll reveal aspects of their childhood where like the dad was maybe an alcoholic, dad wasn't there was a lot of violence in the house, and you pick these things up. And over time, as you look back in retrospect, you really notice these things start to correlate. But when you're in these areas, there's no, as you say, the community centres are getting shut down. There's no really much apart from drugs, and that seems like the only kind of con. Well, let's see if you're growing up in an area and where you're encouraged to maybe get a trade, like work in a building site, because from my experience, that's what the main kind of, for guys anyway, is the main job title to pursue. And you look at it and you're like, it's you see people, you look at maybe your parents, or I say your parents, like, usually separated. That was another thing. See if your mum and dad was together, you get slagged. Know what I mean? Have your pals, because it was like, your mum and dad still together. Not as if like, what have you got to complain about? Because it was odd to see somebody with their mum and dad together. You go and their mum and dad get on together. So there's one thing being together, but they actually get on together. Know what I mean, mates? You go in and they're just sick of the sight of each other. They've got opposite ends of the house. So it's a really bizarre thing to see. And the thing is, when you're in the scheme, you're looking at it and you're like, I don't want to be struggling. You're looking at your mum and dad have been working. They've went down that path there, encouraging you to go down, and through no fault of their own, it's like they're just wanting you to pursue something that's going to give you security, it'll bring you in money, and which will keep you at the jail. But you're looking at it and you're seeing them struggling to make ends meet, and you're like, that's not the life I want. But then you're looking at some people, they look as if they've got life easy because they're their own boss. You know what I mean? They drive the nice cars, they've got the nice woman with them, they've got the nice clays and that, and you're like, that's what I want. It's not I want to be a drug dealer and poison the community. It's not, I want to be living a life where I can earn good things for myself. Plus as well, for a lot of people, is that image. It's that respect thing. And when you go into jails as well, people are just trying to survive too. I know, and it's like, I've had a bit of stick for this in the past. When you look at drug dealers, it's like nowadays, like there's so... Honest to God, it's like, see, try to acquire drugs. I don't know what it was like back in like the 90s or that. In my, for what I surmise, like, if you knew a drug dealer, there'd be one like here.
There was a couple in the scheme
but now there's one in every street. You've got them on Snapchat, they've got accounts, they're sending you shopping lists and all that. It's mental. It's like a delivery service. So it's so common. So it's like, and we go back to, if I touch on the legality of drugs, like I had a cocaine problem for a number of years. A drug problem for quite a while, but see all my problems that arose for drugs, not one of them was the legality. It wasn't a case of it being illegal, no, it's the kind of stuff I got up to and the problems it caused me outside of that. But for me in the environment I was, it was like, it's so many people I know have got that take drugs, and a high percentage of them I know have got drug problems. So when you're in that environment, and it's, as James is saying, and it's hard to dislocate yourself from that, because right now I still find, in sobriety, abstinence, I've been totally abstinent about 19 months, and I'll be honest, it's probably the loneliest period I've done in my life. And I've not got a problem with it, because I've got a lot of things I can focus my energy, my passions into it, but there is a lot of times where I do feel disconnected from my friends group, and I've not got a lot of friends that are still heavy drug users. Some they're drinkers and that kind of thing, but sometimes when they go out and they have a few pints, I don't want to be in an environment with people drinking. I just don't enjoy it. But it's that way, you find yourself isolated, not so much isolated, but you just feel it's like a teething period where you kind of go on your own, and then obviously when you go into fellowship, you connect with other people in the same situation. But that's what I find with what I try to do in my social media, right? I've always tried to own my past. A lot of people try and hide away from it. You'll see a lot of people, they've been in jail, but they'll try and hide it. I owned it for the offset. My initial thinking was, it's going to come back and bite me in the arse anyway if I try and hide for it, so I may as well just own the narrative and say how it is. But I realised the power of relatability. I talk about it all the time. See people that's able to relate to somebody they see online. Some people might look at me and say I'm doing well. I'm just doing my thing. I'm doing a lot better than I used to be doing, so I see it's a positive. But I'll speak about my troubles. I'll speak about the high points, the low points, because social media, a lot of people just advertise the good points and they hide away the bad points. I try and advertise it all for the point as well. It's I'm realising now, it's like a lot of people, you don't realise your problems. They may be unique to you, but they're no unique problems. So somebody might be sitting and they've got an issue that they're not telling anybody about. They might be embarrassed, it might be drugs, might be alcohol, might be whatever. But then if they see somebody online owning that problem and saying it, like, it's not just me. And immediately you find somebody you can connect with and you realise I'm not alone, and that can act as the Kickstarter to move you out of that, whether it be drugs, whether it be any kind of situation where, for me, I like to try and show people you don't need to grow up in a scheme and become a drug dealer to do well for yourself. And you don't need to work in a building site if you don't want to work in a building site, because in my experience, that was the only two options I had. And when I look at that, I'm like, fucking hell, it's like my only option of what I perceived to becoming an entrepreneur was to get a 2.5 and go and try and sell it on top of it, and then just land myself selling the shit even more. So it's the importance of realising your role. And that's why I go back to the grassroots thing. It's like I could look to say the powers that be, what are you doing about this? Why are you not putting money here, there and everywhere? I could be doing that until I'm red in the face and probably getting nowhere. I could just go, right, the powers with me, I can utilise what reach I've got and try and connect with people on that basis.
No, obviously you know how big a fan I am of U50. Like, absolutely love your stuff, and I think that the message you put out, I think you're probably one of the best people online, and you know, I think that about you. And I think obviously we're going to move on to kind of global politics, and I think I'll take it to that. I'll just take it to, obviously, like, the prison system's obviously broken. I think we've all kind of realised that, and we can all be hopeful that HMP Glasgow is going to be. I'm kind of what was it you said earlier? Optimistic. Aye, that's what I love about that. But if we go on to kind of look at global politics, we're probably going to be looking at the same sort of stuff here again, where that Tommy talks about earlier about the kind of wealth distribution, the powers that are kind of. Do you know what I see? I see gangs and I see gang fighting and I see all this, right? And I know this is going to be controversial because a lot of soldiers out there and stuff like that, but and I don't think any bad about any soldier on a personal level. I've got loads of friends who are actually in the military, but as a whole and as a collective, it's very similar to I'm coming into your territory, now you fucking know I've got a bigger gun than you, I've got a bigger machete than you, and I'm going to use it. And I think that's I'll take it to Palestine. I'll take it to you, Tommy. That's kind of what I see Israel is doing. I see Israel as a kind of force of bad. I see them as bullies. I see them bullying a community who, basically a state that's got absolutely no weapons and they've got everything. I'll just take it to you, Tommy. What do you think about the situation?
Sean, I had a wee argument online with somebody recently who took a bit of umbrage at my constantly posting about Palestine and the crimes that Israel is committing. And their post was, what the fuck's it got to do with us? Why you live in, he said, Britain, which kind of let me know his political angle, because most people who say Britain tend to think that Britain's a country when it's not a country. It's just a unit of description. And I said to him, listen, mate, go away and read a book. What it's got to do with us is we're responsible for it. Because in 1916, a guy called Lord Balfour signed the land that people were living in to another set of people that weren't there. So we gave away something that we didn't own to another group of people who weren't there at the time. The Balfour Treaty that was signed by a British minister guaranteed that Jews could go from all over Europe to a place called Palestine and set up home and create a new country. It was eventually done in 1948, and that's where Israel emerges. And if somebody came to your house, Sean, and you've worked long and hard for many, many years to save enough money to get a mortgage, and it's taken you 30, 40 years, you've got the mortgage, you've got the house, and somebody turns up and taps your door and says, hey, I'm taking your house, get to fuck. You're going to resent that, and you're going to fight it. And that's the story of Palestine. Palestinians have been kicked out of their land, out of their houses. They've been treated like shit. And I find it utterly, utterly hypocritical that we as a society, think it's all right to send arms to Ukraine, apparently to defend them against what they call Russian aggression. And I'd love to come back on that because I don't see it that way.
Right.
But people think, we should defend Ukraine, let's send arms there. Why are we not sending arms to Palestine?
Mm-hmm.
It's a fucking disgrace for anybody to call it a war. It's not a war.
No.
It's like fucking shooting fish in a barrel, man. It's a disgrace. The Palestinians don't have any aeroplanes, don't have any navy. These people are literally slaughtering thousands and thousands of Waynes. And the only good that's going to come out of it, Sean, in my opinion, the only good is that it's going to expose the way the world is to a lot of people who didn't know that that's the way the world was. Yeah. Loads of people, I think, have now realised, wait a minute, this is fucking rotten. Mm-hmm. And some people didn't care. How you can see some of these pictures of these Waynes and no care, I would question your humanity, I've got to say that. So for me now, I used to believe, for instance, Sean, I used to believe that there should be a two-state solution. It was called the two-state solution. They should have a Palestine and an Israel and they should be coexistent. I don't believe that anymore. No, I think there should be one single state and the Israelis can have a bit of it, but they should call it something else, because what they have done is they have, in my opinion, exposed what evil actually looks like in the 21st century. They epitomise to me evil. And the fact that Britain, France, Germany are doing fuck all about it makes me sick to the pit of my stomach. So I just hate the hypocrisy of the whole thing, Sean, I really do.
I think what I hate about it is and the stuff you get online is people saying you're anti-Semitic or you're anti-Jew. I do not. I'm anti-Israel. I don't like what the Israeli government's doing. If I said I don't like what Putin's doing, that would be fine. Nobody would even question that. But if you say I don't like what Netanyahu's doing, you're not allowed to have that opinion.
Exactly.
It's a narrative that's been set by people, a government to me, and that's just my opinion on it. Obviously, I know it's controversial. Listen, Jewish people are going to be brought up, they're conditioned. I can understand where they're coming from. I can understand there's a thing there. But for me to look at that kind of, it's not, as you say, I wouldn't call it a war, it's a slaughter to me. I think that you've got to look at it and question your kind of hanging. What do you think it, Jordan?
So it's interesting just to see what echo what Tommy said there. See the Israel and Palestine thing. I'll be honest. See, up until this recently kicked off, I wasn't too well versed on it. I understood. I knew of Palestine, knew of Israel. I wasn't educated on this conflict and what had been going on for a number of years. And I think it's funny, and it's almost like it could. I'll use the term perfectly timed. See, when you use the Russian-Ukraine thing, that was so closely occurring to this Israel and Palestine thing. Like recently, obviously, it's been going on for a number of years with Israel and Palestine, but like the genocide, what's been occurring now, see, it has really opened the world's eyes up. Especially, like, see people that can be free thinking. I mean, there's some people that will just buy into whatever they see in a paper or whatever they see in the news, and I feel that number is dwindling. It is, because it's like, if you look back like in maybe the 50s and onwards, and from that age, I think the percentage of people that got their news from the media, tabloids and such, that was much higher, because you didn't really have much of an alternative. Nowadays, you've got social media, you can get the raw news before it's been edited or anything like that. So it has really woken people's eyes up, because then they're looking at one side of the coin, like there was a lot of support for Ukraine, like housing people for Ukraine and all that kind of stuff, which is great. It's like they want to support people that are affected by conflict, that have got like they're innocent. But then you're looking at this Israel-Palestine thing, it's happened so close to that, and you're going like, right, wait a minute, what's the difference here? You know what I'm talking about? And it's like people are going like that, and then they're starting to question, and it's starting to open their eyes up. It's really, nowadays, it feels as if, like in politics, like in the higher level of politics, when you're looking at these, it's became so apparent who's in whose pocket. You know what I'm talking about? And it's like before, and I understand this has probably been going on longer than I've been alive, longer than others have been alive, but it was a secret. And it was because it was able to keep secret because we knew what we were told, but now we're able to figure it out and people are starting to piece two and two together, and it's quite interesting because I think we're in the cusp of a real change in the way the world operates, and whether it's for the better or for the worse, I'm not too sure. But you know, look at that book, 1984, is that what it's called?
George Orwell.
That thing, it's just like a lot of people are echoing that. Is like how a lot of things that are occurring nowadays are reflecting what was written in that book. So it's like, it's an interesting time, I'll say that.
So, Davey, obviously, you're kind of privy to quite a lot of the stuff that's going on over there, and I know that you're kind of similar to Tommy's views. You've got friends, and I know you lost friends and stuff, Davey. So, what's your take on the kind of Israel-Palestine stuff at the moment?
I just think it's a horrific genocide that's going on. I can't believe it. You know, if you think about it, Israel was created because the state of Israel that you just talked about, the Balfour Treaty, Tommy, was created because of Europeans' guilt about allowing 6 million Jews to be slaughtered in the gas chambers and all the rest of it. We were riddled with guilt. Oh, we better give them a homeland. So what do? We cleared the land of Palestinians who've been there for centuries. I mean, their olive trees are over 100 years old, 200 years old. I think it's absolutely brutal. I can't believe that the politicians of the world have closed their eyes to it. If you ask the population of the world who they support Palestine.
Aye.
Ask the politicians, they're all supporting Israel. But that was, I mean, our recently departed First Minister, Humza Yousaf, he was the only political leader of a country who stood up and said, I demand a ceasefire immediately. Wouldn't he?
Not in the world, Dave, in the Western world, because fortunately Colombia, fortunately Venezuela, Brazil, South Africa, these countries have made it absolutely clear they're with Palestine. They're leading the International Criminal Court case against Israel for their war crimes, which is brilliant. Great. But the Western world, you're absolutely right when it comes to the Western world. I mean, it's so sad. You look at, Hungary. The guy, Orban. We're now in a situation where left and right, and I'm going to excuse Jordan from this because of his age, right? But left and right for me and David goes back years and years and years. And it used to be quite simple. Now it's so complicated. Now it's so complicated because some of the governments, like this guy Orban for Hungary, on his social policies and his attitude to refugees and things like that, I despise what he stands for. But on Palestine, on Ukraine and things like that, I'm saying to myself, actually, he's even that fucking fanny Farage is coming out and actually making statements that I can't disagree with when he says that Russia was provoked to invade Ukraine. Now, by the way, I've dirtied my mouth with mentioning him. Let me mention the Pope, because at least he had the balls to turn round and say, when you poke the bear, you're going to have to expect a reaction. He had the balls to say that invasion was provoked. It never came out of blue sky. It came because NATO decided they wanted to have nuclear weapons on the border of Russia. And if Russia was deciding to put them into Mexico, America would be going crazy about it.
Yeah.
I don't blame good, Tommy, because for 10 years we supported the war in the Donbass region. We were provoking the Russians. We were provoking the Russian bear. 14,000 people killed. People don't understand, Sean, when you think about Ukraine. People think, it started in 22. It never started in 22. It started in 2014 when there was a coup in Ukraine that overthrew an elected government in Ukraine. Why? Because the government was quite pro-Russia. They were friendly towards Russia. What did the Americans do? No, we don't want that. We want the lithium resources that are in the Donbass. We want to exploit all of the grain resources that's in Ukraine. We want a government that's pro-West. They overthrew the government in 14. The Donbass resisted it. And for 8 years, they had 14,000 casualties in Donbass. Nobody said, that's terrible. They were Nazis. See, if you look at all the media, go and troll the media before the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. All the media was going mental about how corrupt Ukraine was, how it was Nazis that were running the army. It was a disgrace. It was a right-wing government. Soon as Russia invaded it, it's a disgrace, it's bad, big bad Russia. Well, we're having a go at Ukraine for everything they were doing beforehand. It is
fucking hypocrisy, and it's horrible.
I think a lot of, I mean, obviously a lot of it goes way back, but what do you think, James? Obviously I know you're kind of you're pro-Palestine as well. What's your take on the whole thing as well? Because there's obviously two sides to it, and you need to try and look. Do you see two sides to it, or do you?
In any conflict, there is always two sides, but it's that thing where I'm pro non-violence, and the reason that is because violence causes trauma, and trauma begets trauma, and then it just keeps it cyclical. Mm-hmm. And even if you look at what Tommy's talking about, other people just sit back and they say things like, what's it got to do with you? You're not even fair there. Then they're basically asking you just to be a bystander to human suffering. And there is nothing in my humanity that will say to me that I'll be a bystander to human suffering. The same as I wouldn't be a bystander if the guy that stays next door was battering his missus. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't sit in the house and say, that's what happens in relationships. Let them work it out for themselves. Mm-hmm. And there's a wee Wayne in there screaming, who I know through my own awareness and knowledge base that the Wayne's getting wired for toxic stress and the missus is getting traumatised as well. And if you've not got enough of a social conscience to recognise that whether it's next door or across a border or across the sea, these people belong to us. We all belong to each other. And I think like Mother Teresa had a brilliant quote. She said that the world's ills are because we forgot we belong to each other. And when you otherise a population, it's easy for you to kill them or maim them or oppress them. But if you remember that they belong to us, they could be our Waynes, they could be our mothers and daughters, then it'll pull on your humanity to say, be a voice like Tommy and what David does with Spirited. It'll pull on you to go, right, I've got the power to do this bit here. And I love the way Gabor Mati's got a talk on YouTube where he talks about Palestine. He describes it as the oppressed becoming the oppressor, which is a trauma response, and it's just intergenerational. So the Israeli attitude is that they'll never be an oppressed state, a culture again, and a people, and they'll do everything in their power to stop that. But the way they're doing it is what was done to them, so they think they need to eliminate other people or it'll stop them. But paradoxically, they're creating their own demise in the process of doing it, because the rest of humanity eventually, what Tommy says, are starting to see the evil in it now. People start saying it's not okay for you to do that. So regardless of the arguments behind what Palestine done, which we aren't fully aware of anyway, because propaganda works that way. They tell you what they think you want to hear in order for them to justify what they're doing. But the reality is, Palestine are a totally powerless nation who haven't got the weapons and the resources to fight back equally. I mean, even if you take it back to our boxer as a wee boy, and a good boxing coach is like the social conscience of a club. Mm-hmm. He's not going to put a wee guy at 8 stone in the ring with somebody at 15 stone because he's going to get annihilated. Mm-hmm. That's almost the same dynamic. They've not got the tools to fight back. So if you've not got the tools to fight back, you overcompensate to survive. And that's why they strap bombs to themselves. That's why they fight back the way they do, because they've no other tools at their disposal.
I think
we need to intervene in that. You can't be a bystander there.
No, and I think if you look at, I said this, and I got quite a bit of stick for it. Like if you look at the troubles in Ireland, see if like the British Army had just blew up a hospital in the middle of Ireland, it wouldn't have happened. There would have been an outrage because it was in the Western world, and because we can see ourselves as that Irish, we can see ourselves in that culture. It's the same culture. It's the same. We're able, for whatever reason, and I think Goebbels and Machiavelli and people like that would be absolutely singing in their grave with the way that we've been able to kind of use the narrative of the way. Just if you look at Machiavelli's work and you look at like Goebbels' work, the propaganda machine that's been working against is actually still getting people where I actually go like sometimes. I don't know what you're watching, mate. I don't know what it is you're seeing here, like that you can stick up for that. Like I cannot Do you know what I mean? There's nothing there that I can see that you. So I'm going like obviously with Tommy was saying, looking at Ukraine, looking at Putin. I watched Putin with, was it Tucker Carlson? I watched the full thing, and everybody's saying, don't give Putin a voice, don't give him that. He's the guy's got to have his view, surely. And whether you like him or no, I'm not saying he's a great guy, I don't think, but I also don't think Biden, Trump and all that. So what do you think of the kind of just the global state? How do we heal in this crazy world where everything's going so right wing and going so right? I just can't believe what I'm watching sometimes, the way people are going, how much hatred is in the world. It's how do we bring in a healing? How do we heal this world?
Awareness. You need to educate people, because it's running outside their education, so they just apply their own opinion to it based on the limited knowledge they might have on the issue. For example, when Trump was voted in, people were looking at Trump as a problem, but Trump's just a reflection of the society that voted him in. Mm-hmm. So when people look at Trump, they think, oh, he's a head case. I'm like, I'd be more concerned about the head cases that voted him in, because that's primarily the people's mindsets that you need to change.
But do you think if you spin it?
Well, Sean, take the point that James has made, which is absolutely apt. Trump got voted in 2016, and most ordinary people thought, he's a fucking bammer. How can you vote for this guy? You're a fucking idiot. He's a sexist, racist, misogynist, everything. He get more votes in 2020 when he lost than he did in 2016. Yeah. Right? He get more, people don't know that. He get 4 million more votes. Right? Biden won, but Trump got more votes. So what does that tell you about the society that he's living in? Yeah. That he gets more votes, no less. And you've asked there about, how do we change things and how do we bring people together? The West, to me, is summed up in November. The only 2 choices America's got is an octogenarian who's a corrupt, lying bastard in the shape of Biden, and Trump, who is already convicted, but never mind that, he's also a misogynist, racist, failed businessman who is born with a silver spoon in his mouth all his life. That's the 2 choices. That's America, the most powerful nation in the whole of our world. So see, for me, honestly, Sean, and it'll be controversial, I know that, but that's just fine. I actually like Putin. I think Putin talks more sense than any of them put together. And it wasn't the Tucker Carlson interviews I listened, it was the Oliver Stone series of interviews, 5 hours worth, where Oliver Stone goes and follows him and interviews him for over a 5-hour period. The guy has an historical knowledge that puts these people to shame. Yeah. And from my point of view, I don't think that guy wants war. I don't think he wants war at all. But do you know what he doesn't want? To be invaded again. Because they know what invasion's about. They suffered it. They lost more people liberating the world than any other country in the world. And we never should forget that. But the media would have us forget it. They lost 20 million people freeing us from Nazism. Yep. And yet we're supposed to hate them. I don't hate Russia. Yep. I don't hate Putin. I think they talk sense. And I think the NATO is the aggressor here. NATO is the organisation that's causing the conflicts across the world, driven by America, who wants to sell arms to every country in the world. They don't want peace. Peace isn't profitable. They want war and war and war. And when we realise that, we've then got to say to ourselves, we need to change things. And things are going to change, Sean. There's new kids on the block in the shape of the BRICS organisation, which is bringing together China, bringing together Russia, bringing together South Africa. They're all now saying, there's a decision just the other day there, they're going to not renew. Saudi Arabia has decided not to renew the petrol currency deal. So they're no longer going to be selling petrol in dollars. They're now going to set up different currencies that allows countries across the world to trade in their own currency instead of having to trade in dollars. America, in my opinion, is fucked. Yeah. And quite frankly, I applaud it.
So this is what obviously, and this maybe reaches into conspiracy theory and stuff like that, right? Especially maybe 10, 20 years ago, it was definitely conspiracy theory. I've always thought it. I've always thought there's a few groups in the world, call them what you like, call them the Bilderberg, the Davos group, whatever you want to call it. There's groups of people that are meeting who are politicians, who are like market people, businessmen, and are legally meeting behind scenes politicians, and then no telling the public what they're talking about. Are these the groups that are, because these are obviously the Carlisle group, Halliburton, they've got the cheek to go in and they sell the weapons, and then they go in Halliburton and rebuild the thing they've just destroyed. But is this a conspiracy theory now, or is this what's actually happening? Is there these big corporations, big pharma, big weapons? Are these the people behind it, or is it just simple politics gone wrong?
See, if you think about it though, like think it right, the second what you just said there, right, is it a conspiracy theory, or is it just this is how the way things have worked out? I'd be more surprised if it wasn't a conspiracy theory.
Same.
No, I mean, it's like when you look at it as well, see if we look at what lengths some people are willing to go for money. We'll take recent times, for example, which we know to be true. If we look at like the COVID PPE scandal, like Matt Hancock and that, is like it was like businesses that were worth like it's a couple of grand or something immediately getting turned into like £1 million businesses overnight due to this. It's like a lot of these people find their way into power. There will be people behind the scenes pulling the strings, but see the people that get manoeuvred into power, they've found their way into that position. And I'm not saying I know much about politics behind the scenes, but for what I've garnered, the people that are manoeuvred into power is the people, right, you owe me a favour. It's like, it's funny handshakes is the terminology it's that I like to use, you know what I mean? It's just the best way I describe it. And you find that a lot of these people, they go to these private schools together, they're brought up with the same families and that kind of thing. It's like, it's almost like its own community. That serves elitism, that's exactly it, that serves itself. And as you said, Tommy, it's like there's no profit in peace, profit in war, and the casualties of war are probably seen as collateral damage. It's part and parcel of it. And it's like, at what point do these people just don't value human life, or they don't value human life?
I'll ask you this, Jordan, right? Why should somebody like Jeff Bezos have more money than the full Ukraine GDP? Why should that be allowed? But my argument is always, where is the minimum wage? Why do we not have a maximum wage where we can start, as people we've all kind of spoke about, distribution of the wealth seems to be the thing that would probably solve a lot of the problems that we've been talking about if the wealth was distributed. So why are you allowed £193 billion in your bank?
Right, if you look at like the circumstance of Jeff Bezos, it's understandable. See, you think that it's like a ridiculous amount of money. It's like it would take so many lifetimes in order to actually spend it, and that's living quite comfortably. But at the same time as well, if you look at like it has built Amazon for like a garage. It's like I can understand, I can appreciate like the entrepreneurial. It's like he's built something for nothing. You know what I mean? And it's like if we compare that to what we were just talking about there, people profiting for war. It's like Amazon is a really reliable service. I use Amazon all the time to the point where, see if I want to go something, and I think, not intentionally, this is what's led to a cause of like going down like Buchanan Street and you've got shops shutting down, you've got a lot less people because convenience. It's I go into the shops to get a t-shirt and maybe not have my size, or I don't like the t-shirts here. I go online, I've got probably 3-4 times the selection, and I've usually always got what I'm looking for. With Amazon, you've got next day delivery. It's like, it's super convenient, and I understand convenience is really what's killing society, but it's who's at fault for that? The person that's providing convenience or the people that are seeking it? Because nobody, how often do you go, I don't want to order something online. I'll just go walk about Buchanan Street for 2 hours, try to find something, hopefully find it. You're going to order it. And so it is a really reliable service, but then there's the thing as well, it's the minimum wage thing as well. See the amount of jobs I've applied for in the past, and they go like that, oh, we do offer minimum wage. And I'm like, so you're selling the fact that you are offering the lowest wage per hour by law. Any less would probably be seen as illegal. And you're advertising that as if it's a great thing. I'd be mad if you said it was like, we're above minimum wage. Aye, great, that's good that you're going above. But it's like, you look at it as well, it's like these people, you're Jeff Bezos, but in the distribution of wealth, there is some people though that are just willing to sit in their arse and take money. Like maybe there's people in benefits, and I'm not saying there's a majority, there's probably a minority of them, but there are people there who just want something for nothing. And I appreciate the fact that people like Jeff Bezos, he's like built that for the ground up, and maybe he has aims to be like a billionaire, but that's through his own hard work. And I don't really know what's went behind the scenes in Amazon. I don't know if they've maybe won contracts in a dodgy way as such. I'm not going to assume that because I'm not seeing any news or any information to back that up. So I feel as if he's built that business the right way, so he's just quite deservedly reaping the profits there.
I think maybe I'm just using like, if you took like obviously we've spoken about it before, I honestly think it's ridiculous now. I think it's like 0.8% of the wealth is owned, 99% of the wealth is owned by 0.8% of the world. Now, in any business or any infrastructure, any kind of institution, how is that fair?
Well, even if you take it right back to morality, it's like you've got more than you need.
Aye.
And the thing about it is as well, because I've often thought, I remember being a 17-year-old boy in my housing scheme saying to myself, see, if I won the lottery, I would build a rehab in my scheme and help all my pals. Where does that come from? That comes from an innate part of me that wants to alleviate human suffering. So what's going on with you if you've got billions and you could alleviate mass human suffering, that you hoard that? Because that's something to do with what's going on with you at an individual level. And I can only, I think it's addiction. Because if you've made money your God, then it's always £5 more than you've got. And you will hoard that. That's why greed's one of the 7 deadly sins that have been written for about 2,000 years.
Right.
So I think they were onto something. So at the individual level, we could look at it as he's worked hard to get what he wants, blah, blah, blah. But there's working hard to get what you want and working hard to get what you need.
I think as anybody should be allowed to live a comfortable lifestyle. Like
Everybody.
It's
Everybody.
And I think there's enough to go about. It's no the case, but look, even looking at the votes, honestly, I honestly looked at Reform UK's manifesto. Now, I'm not saying that for a minute that he would have implemented, probably wouldn't have implemented any of it, right? But I did look at it and go, this guy's making fucking more sense than half of the other people. And the stuff he's talking about. So this moving to right wing, I mean, obviously Nigel Farage, you've seen how quick he dropped all his pals. As soon as he got in, he was like, "Oh, I don't associate with them." Do you know what I mean? Straight away, like that's the type of person we're dealing with. But
Charlatan.
We're looking at the politics in this day and age. Is it just we're looking for something different? Is that what are we looking for something to, like, what is it we're looking for? Because well, that was clearly, as Tommy texted me the day that Labour had won and says that was just an anti-Tory vote.
Yeah.
Which I totally believe. But what is it we're looking for as a society? Where is it? Because there is a massive division that's just come out of nowhere. Where do you think it's came from?
It's a bit like an empty mic. Nobody's talking here, so somebody fills the space. And that's what politics is about. Nobody likes a vacuum. Somebody will fill the vacuum.
Yeah.
And usually people's first instinct is to go with the idea of helping people, to go with the idea of cooperation, go with the idea of everybody getting a fair crack at the whip. But see, when the people that you put your faith in to do all that let you down and betray you, then you'll maybe go to the more extreme one who's saying, let's blame the refugees. You know, we've got all these millionaires and billionaires. They've got 5 and 6 houses and 6 and 7 yachts. But never mind that, let's blame the wee boats. It's the wee boats that's the problem, not the big yachts.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking for a scapegoat.
Yep.
And sometimes the scapegoat is dead easy because you then, as somebody who's quite poor and you've got your life's not very good, at least I'm better than him. At least I'm better than that. And yeah, you want to blame the Romanian or the Polish or whatever other asylum seeker that's came or immigrant that's came to live and work here. You want to blame them rather than inward. Because somebody's fueling that, somebody's telling you to blame them, and it becomes dead easy. What's happened there? I was just discussing it with David before we started. You know, people, the media, landslide Labour victory, landslide for Starmer. What a lot of shite! The guy got 3 million votes less than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2017. And what did everybody get told to? Everybody was told to hate Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, he's a Czechoslovakian spy. He's a friend of Russia. He's an anti-Semite. Hate Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn got 3 million more votes than fucking Sir Keir Starmer, but it's a landslide. In 2019, the most recent election, Jeremy Corbyn got 650,000 more votes, but it's a landslide for Starmer. It's not a landslide for Starmer. What it is the right winger split. The right winger split. Some of them voted Reform, some of them voted Tory. More people voted right wing at the recent election than left wing. That's the sad thing for me. In England. In England.
Yeah.
I'm afraid Scotland's different. We didn't have the same. We don't have the same narrative. And I've got loads of pals in England. I've got loads of parts of England, Liverpool, Newcastle, lots of really, really nice people. But England's a different country. They've got a different narrative to us. And personally, until we get our independence and we start taking decisions for ourselves, we're going to be stuck with a right-wing political narrative. And it's something that we, I think, should not accept.
Yeah.
So, looking at like do you think what Scotland voted? Because there's a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people, that's independence finished, it's like blah, 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 that was a anti-independence vote. I don't see that. I think it was just basically get the fucking Tories out and that was it. It was like vote Labour and that you never had any other choice. What do you think? What's your take on it, James?
Yeah, I think, I mean, so much has been promised in Scotland for so long, and some people just get to a place where they go, enough's enough, and they'll tactically vote. And it's not necessarily voting for the right thing, it's just voting because they're sick of them continuing to do the same thing, and no change.
I think...
Also, Sean, but I add to that bit there because I'm compelled to say when you talk about people voted for something because they felt betrayed. We had the lowest turnout in British political history. Lowest turnout at a general election. Why? What if it's supposed to be a landslide? Starmer's going on there, I'm for hope, I'm for change. We had less people voted at this general election than has ever voted at a general election in British political history. The figure they use is 1895, right? That's how far back they go. 1895 women, did they have the vote? Working class men, did they have the vote, right? Yeah. So it's a pretty poor example. It's the worst turnout at a general election in our history. What does that tell you about the fucking set of politicians we've got? That they can't even inspire you to go and get your wee bit of lead pencil. It's just, they're to blame for our problems, Sean. Absolutely. But they don't suffer the consequences. Because they'll be getting their big pensions and their big wages, you know?
I think it goes back to what Jordan said earlier when Jordan said, I'm just... ignorance is bliss. I can't be bothered. They're all the same. They all let me down. Do you think that's...
But people want Jordan to think like that. The people who are in power want Jordan not to look into it. That's why I was dead pleased when Jordan made that point there about how what's happening in Israel and Palestine has made them look into it a wee bit more, has opened his eyes a wee bit more. That's the only thing, the only positive that can come out of the horrible, horrific, inhumane suffering of these people in Palestine is that it opens people's eyes to how our world is rotten to the core and needs to be changed, and that the hypocrisy that is being peddled by Israel has to be opposed. I hope that people like Jordan, who maybe didn't have the benefit of... I've had a great benefit. I went to university. I've been able to study this, that and the next thing. I've had that benefit, right? So I've been able to look at different things. But I'm up against a media. I looked this morning at the media and a BBC report, 16 people killed last night in an air attack in Palestine. Same organisation, 5 people killed by Russia in an air attack in Ukraine. No mention of Israel. In the first attack where 16 people are killed. There's what happens. There's the BBC, the biggest propagandist in the world. They want to keep people ignorant of what's really going on. And I think we need to open people's eyes by going on and on and on. That people, as I say, but this started earlier with me saying somebody having a go at me. Why do you keep going on about Palestine? What the fuck's it got to do with us? What it's got to do with us is we started it. We started it, beginning away somebody's land that we didn't even belong to us. So that's why it's got something to do with us.
And do you think that, Tommy, that type of propaganda and the way that creates that apathy, that collective apathy where people go like that. What's the point in voting?
There's a guy called John Polger who sadly died. John Polger. I would encourage anybody that's not read any John Polger, please read some of his books or watch his documentaries. They're absolutely outstanding to actually educate you, and it's well worth doing it. But John Polger, in one of his books called Heroes, which was a fantastic book, he makes the point about speaking to a Russian visiting politician that comes to Parliament, and this Russian politician is making the point about how debate in Britain is sort of confined. It's a bit like having a boxing ring, but you're only allowed to discuss certain things. As soon as you discuss poverty and changing the way we own the industry, all of a sudden you're an extremist. So you're not allowed in the boxing ring anymore. You're only allowed if you want to discuss inflation and how high inflation is and what you want to do with the Bank of England's interest rates. Oh, you can discuss that, but don't dare say why is energy owned by private owners when it's something that's essential, should be owned by society. Don't dare say that. You're an extremist. And the Russian politician says to Polger, this is marvellous, the consent that you've managed to get. We had to use gulags to get that type of consent, but you just use the media. And that's what they do. They get us to accept that it's just a normal thing that people live in poverty. Oh, well, that's just the way it is. It's not just the way it is. Nelson Mandela said it loud and clear. Poverty is man-made. Poverty can be unmade, but you need to have the balls to stand up to the powerful. And unfortunately, we don't have in positions of power people that are willing to stand up to the powerful.
No, I agree. Obviously, Natalie, you're working in the prison system and stuff like that. What do the guys in the prison make about politics and stuff? Are they I mean, you'll see that's. I think it was Dostoevsky says you should kind of look at a society and kind of look at it and kind of value it by its prison systems and how its prison systems work. What do the guys in prison, do you hear them talking about politics, or is that something that the awareness level so low that they wouldn't even kind of come up in?
No, definitely not. Sean, I think society probably misrepresent people in prison, because people in prison are some of the cleverest people that I have ever met in my life before. These guys are entrepreneurial. And a lot of them don't have the ignorance is bliss mindset. A lot of them very much have the mindset, they're very clever in the fact that they'll say, how's that happening? But that's not right. They don't use academic words. They don't go down to London for a pint of milk. They call it exactly for what it is, Sean. We know that our whole government has not worked for a long time when we look at how wealthy we are, but yet we're so deprived in everything. Like, these guys have really, really, really good voices and they make really, really good points, but they're so discriminated against voting for society because they don't get a vote because they're in prison. So why should they get a vote? We're going to strip that away for you as well, because we're going to take away your liberty, your values, your dignity, and we're going to take away your right to vote. But why? Because they have a voice, right? We all have a voice. Even my son that's 17, my son's he's been raised in a house where we openly talk about trauma and poverty and disadvantage, and he's getting to an age where he's going to be able to vote, and he's like, socialism versus communism. I'm like, who do you vote? Because they're all lying bastards. He's 17 and he already sees a society of lying bastards. Who do you vote for? They're all as corrupt as each other. Like you said, we had a left and right wing where you absolutely knew Labour's the working party. This is what you're getting for it. You're like, what party's what now? Because everything's so amalgamated into things that cons know. People in prison know who to vote for. They know their rights, they know their values, they know their liberty. Children, here's the thing, Jordan's on social media, right? That's taken over because we don't just have the Sun and the Herald and the Daily Record and the BBC. We have TikTok, we have Facebook, we have X, we have all these platforms where the young team are coming in and going, shite. Absolute nonsense. I'm not voting for you because I don't believe in you and you're talking nonsense. And I think that's what we need to have, the younger generation that's more wise, because we need to be clever, we need to be clued up on what's happening politically, right? Because for me, I don't want to be ignorant about it, because I know that I'm paying my taxes into a prison system that absolutely doesn't work. I know that I'm paying my taxes into that's supposed to go to housing for war veterans, but people are leaving the army and they're not getting accommodation. So I know that I'm feeding into a failed system. The young team's going to know that, because people like Jordan's going to make it accessible for the younger generation. So like the whole political thing, like when you had said we're going to be talking about politics, the reason I said veto me out of that conversation is I get so heated and things come out my mouth, my wee ADHD bounces everywhere, and then I become involved in a conversation that I probably shouldn't be involved in, like the Palestine conversation. Like that's something that's very close to my heart, because I've got family that are in Lebanon, so they're caught in a crisis, and people will voice their opinion, and I'm like, you don't even know what's happening. Like you've just told us the history there. People don't know that, but they're shouting about Palestine or Israel, and it's like, do you know what you're championing? The people in jail know what they're championing, Sean, because they don't want to be in prison. They know they're part of a failed system. So why are we not collectively saying, who would you vote for? Let's give you a vote. Because again, it's about lining people's pockets with money. And we don't want to line people in prison's pocket with money. And we don't want to give them a voice either. Why would we?
They don't get to vote.
I think that's look at obviously I'm going to try and kind of move on to the last kind of part of the kind of global politics section that we're going to cover, and look at COVID and what you think about COVID, because there's obviously a lot of misinformation going about out there. There's a lot of kind of, I don't know if you want to call it conspiracy theories, whatever you want to call it. For me, it was a huge test to see how much society. I'm not saying there wasn't a virus, COVID virus. I think they reacted, and I think it was a test to see how we would react. I don't know. I'll open the floor up to you guys, and you can kind of.
Sean, it's before you leave it. I'm sorry, Paul, and I'd apologise to everybody, but it's before you leave the global stuff and the political stuff, because the most important thing for me, and I hope Jordan does this via his social media outlet, and I hope we all do it, is we encourage people to ask the most important question of all: why? Yeah. Why are things the way they are? Because as soon as you ask that, then it leads in to the most important questions about power, distribution of power, distribution of wealth. I'm sitting here thinking a Jesuit priest, Brazil, Dom Helder Camara, who was tortured by the military junta for trying to feed the poor. And he came away with a statement which has always stuck with me. He says, when I feed the poor, they call me a saint. But when I ask why are the poor hungry, they call me a communist.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the point, that when you question why are people living in poverty when we're living in a land of plenty, why is so much power concentrated in so few hands? Why is a wee country like Palestine being bombed into smithereens? You ask why, it leads into the questions of why the powerful are powerful. And that's dangerous. And they don't want you to do that. So, sorry to interrupt there, but I just felt I have to say to people, please ask why.
No, I think it's a massive point, Tommy, and I think when you look at people they know, like, that are getting listened to, like Tommy Robinson and Andrew Tate and people like that, these people are articulate on the other side, right? And they know how to get to the young people. They know how to maybe touch on trauma and stuff and manipulate it, I think, into something that's probably their trauma, their kind of mirroring their trauma, and trying to look for a way. It's these people are getting a voice for a reason, James. And I think that if you look at Andrew Tate, for example, I think he's just a traumatised wee guy. See somebody that comes out with a statement like there's no such thing as mental health. That's just a maniac for me. Do you know what I mean? But why it seems to be young people are tuning into these people for some reason and relating. I don't know if you could even think why, James, why.
That's a whole podcast.
That is a whole podcast, actually. That is a whole podcast. Right, so we'll just move on to the COVID thing, right? So, what did you think of COVID? Like, obviously, even if you think it, like, to take the government narrative, how it was handled, blah blah blah. What do you think, Davey?
It was handled appallingly. Yeah, it was a genuine disease. I mean, I got COVID. It meant I was flat out my back for 4 days in the middle of filming something. It was real, but the way it was handled was just absolutely appalling. And I think, you hinted on the fact that was it a test to see how they could control us? They put a whole nation locked up in their own houses for how many? 3 months first time, wasn't it? 3 months.
Easy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's extraordinary control of a nation of people. I mean, oh, good God, I mean, a world of people.
I know.
Quite terrible. And we kind
We've
of
done it.
We did it.
I know.
Weekly we went. Aye.
We've done it. Like we imprisoned ourselves quite
Willingly.
voluntarily. What do you think, Jordan? What's your take on it?
It's a kind of weird subject for me, right? Because see, we talk about the lockdown, as much as I believe the government did balls it up, it's like, because at the start I was very conspiratorial. I was like, right, where does this came from? Because I still don't believe they've really not so much identified, they've not so much revealed it, because I don't believe we live in a world where nobody gets away with anything. So how can you know pin down the exact source of where this thing came from? And there's been a lot of theories. I don't believe the fucking thing about the crab soup, the bat soup. I think that's a lot of shit. Know what I mean? I was under the impression, I was quite conspiratorial about it to start with, because it came around about the time with this Jeffrey Epstein stuff and Prince Andrew. Then suddenly this virus came out and it swept the world. And part of me was like, how do I know this isn't been manufactured somewhere and it's been kept in a lab where it's been released intentionally in order as a big distraction? I don't really know. I can't really pin down why it started. I'm not so much strongly holding that belief now, but whatever it was, it did appear. The government, as much as they did balls it up, I don't really know, they shut down the economy. And I think I do believe the fact that they probably didn't want to shut down the economy for the fact is they wanted money to be coming into it to serve themselves. But we go back to the PPE scandal, they did find a way to make money out of it, and they asked the country to adhere to a set of rules that they weren't sticking to themselves. I was not saying I didn't stick to the rules. I was constantly out. For me, a lot of people did suffer during COVID. For me, it was quite a life-changing experience in the sense where I was furloughed for work. So I was a scaffolder, so I was getting paid a weekly wage to basically no work. For me, in my mind, before then, I was thinking it'd be great if you just get paid not to go to work, and that eventually happened. So in my head, this is the dream. Obviously, the reality didn't match it. But that was when I started posting on social media, just as a distraction, because I remember when we first got told we were going into lockdown, and I remember getting a few cans for the shop, and I was thinking, I remember opening one, like a can of Stella or something it was, and I remember drinking it, and I looked at it and I was like, is this what this is going to consist of? Am I just going to be drinking all the time? I didn't even finish the can, I threw them out. And then the social media journey began, and it led for there. So partly I look back and I think to myself, well, would I have found myself pursuing that if I didn't have all that free time, all that boredom to exist? But right now, when you look at it, it's like my last job, I worked in a student accommodation, and I remember it was probably in the past year, they says if you get COVID now, they're just treating it as the ordinary flu. You don't get what you used to get, like 10 days off, it was like paid or whatever. It's just the ordinary flu, and I found it quite almost comical. I'm like, they've shut down the full world for something new they're treating as an ordinary flu. And I'm kind of on the fence in between it. As I say, I go back to that thing where I've detached for so many things. It's a lot of these ideas and beliefs that I held. I don't know if it's just this point in my life. Maybe the recovery's helped me apart. I'm just trying not to kind of attach my energy to things that really, because I go down rabbit holes to a point where I get frustrated with these things. And to a degree, it's like, will we ever find out where it really came from, what was really going on behind the scenes? Because then we need to rely on the powers that be telling us. And if there was some sort of shifty business going on, the last thing they're going to do is tell us. But if you look at the PPE scandals as an indicator, like, if they were so willing to literally fraudulently obtain millions of pounds, which, and it's clear as day it get done, like, what else were they capable of? So I'm still kind of on the fence with COVID.
No, I'm the same. I'm the same. What do you think, James? What do you think? Do you think it was like a social experiment, or do you think it was? Do you think?
I think it was I do think it created a lot of fear in the culture. I think it was a thing in Public Health Scotland, but like, right, we need to do something. But I don't think they fully knew what they were getting into, and I don't think the World Health Organisation did either. So it became this fix it while you're moving dynamic, and that created all sorts of other unintended consequences. I like to think that it was that big on a scale that Scottish Government wouldn't have bought into a larger conspiracy. There's too many people would know about it if there was a larger conspiracy, and there would be already politicians who might not even be in the political world anymore who'd be out on platforms like this saying, actually, this is what was going on and this is what we're aware of.
I think that was.
Blah, blah. I know, but I don't think it was a big social experiment. I think like any social adversity, they'll study it anyway, because it's opportunity for people to keep the economic system going. It did threaten the economy, and I think that's why there was a concerted effort to do something about it. Anything that threatens the economy, the political system will do something about it. And it's back to Tommy's question earlier on. We should always be asking why. And the thing for me is, I'm a very compassionate human being. I've always have been. And compassion's easy manipulated. So the last thing I wanted to do was put wee Annie next door at risk of a virus if she's got other health comorbidity problems. So what happened is, very quickly, the social media was able to give me information that could control how I behaved. And I started asking the question, like, so if I can go to a shop and stand 10 feet for the guy in front of me while we're getting something because I'm scared of passing on this virus or getting the virus, then if we've got a society and a system that can do that, then why we no psychoeducating the whole of Scottish society on adverse childhood experiences and trauma and what damages relationship? Because if we can get that information into somebody's living room via a phone, that allows you to make necessary behavioural adjustments, then surely you could do that to address a lot of the social ills that we see. And for me, and I know I'm always talking about it, and I always will talk about it, because I believe that all social dysfunction is caused by unresolved trauma. Being traumatised and oppressed makes you easy to manipulate as well, and a lot of folk don't want to own that space. It absolutely does, until you start to see it and you get to the why. And it's like, when you get to the why, you become an activist and stand against it and say, nah, it's not happening to me, no on my watch. Because when I started to recognise, for example, that I could make necessary behavioural adjustments in my own life that stopped this stuff going down the family tree, down the lineage. And I know through my own, like, my life's been also been kind of like a social experiment, because when I worked out my own stuff, I've started to see how it doesn't show up in the veins.
Right.
So my veins, for example, for me making necessary adjustments and asking the why, you'll entertain the how. And the how's the recovery and healing process, so you don't pass this stuff on. And that starts with awareness. My wee lass is 10, and my wee lass was, and you'll probably be able to, the violence in Scotland at one time is so widespread that it was socially acceptable at one point to hit your veins. Like, teachers and professionals were allowed to take weapons and beat your veins. Aye. So when the culture's like that, and there's stuff, the abnormal becomes normal and the unacceptable becomes acceptable, until somebody stands against it and asks the why, and no, that's not right. Look, my 10-year-old, I said no to her. 10-year-olds don't like you saying no to them because they want to do what they want to do. She proceeded to come up the stairs and sit next to me when I was watching the football and tell me, I hate you. You're the worst father. You're the worst father ever. I wish you weren't my father. And just try to get her eyes out me, right? Now, I'm sitting there smiling on my face, and she goes marching up the stair and I'm just watching the football. I said, you can't get your own way all the time, Darcy. The reason I'm happy and I've got a smile on my face, because I would have never been able to be that authentic and get up close in my family of origin to the people who were disappointing me and tell them how I felt, because it was too risky.
Emotion to your eye.
It was too risky, because you don't talk to your parents like that. It was seen as disrespectful, blah, blah, blah. And they've been risky business without getting into the detail, right? So you learn young to suppress
What was it saying?
your
Children
authenticity.
should be seen and not heard.
Aye, and it's back to what Tommy and David and that have been always have been advocating here is allow people to be in their authenticity. Use your social media as a platform to speak to social problems. Stop accepting the unacceptable. Don't allow the abnormal to become normal, like sitting back and saying it's all right to bomb lanes in Palestine because you don't live there and it's nothing to do with you. It's like, use your voice.
Definitely. I think like the COVID thing for me was just, when you look into it, and I mean, there's so much misinformation out there. You just don't know what you're reading these days. But when you look into the vaccine, how quickly it was rolled out and Pfizer and all that, that's where it starts getting questionable to me. Was it something that maybe wasn't a conspiracy, but did these companies jump on it very quickly and go like, we can make a lot of money out of this year or whatever? I don't know, but it just doesn't sit right with me that these companies made these massive amounts of profit, and that's where. What do you think, Natalie? What was your view on COVID? Have you got a view, or?
I'm trying to regulate myself before I respond to it. So I don't like systems. I don't like systems because my whole life has been part of a system. And every system that I've ever been part of throughout since I've been born has failed me, Sean. So when COVID came out, what I seen was another rigid system that was created by a system. And we're in the cold face of it, so don't forget, we're in the communities trying to help people get shopping and people that can't get out. We're out going about all the old age homes, dropping in chocolates and flowers, and
People don't get to see their ma's going to funerals and everything.
But how many years are we out COVID? And I work in an environment that still has COVID regulations and laws. So in prison, we're still working under COVID laws, but we're out of COVID.
Is it?
The court system, they still have elements of the COVID law. We're out of COVID. So again, and that's my dislike for systems, because we create systems and we keep them going when we're out of the crisis. So I'm very opposed to systems, and I'll campaign. That's why I campaign for all this stuff, because I asked the why. I'm not signing that unless you tell me why. Why should I sign that? And then explain it to me in great detail, and then maybe I will. But I want to know the whys, and I want my children to ask the whys and the what ifs. I don't want them to conform to society's views. I want to be shouting at, like Tommy's saying, like I'm not a politician and I don't claim to be, but I'll champion change. I'll shout about Jordan's social media because I want people his age to tune into him so that we're asking what's right. So COVID for me was just another system that we put in place just to control a system. And I don't like systems, so I didn't like COVID. I'd done everything I could to help people out it. So it was like, don't go outside your door, don't do this, don't do that. We work with the most chaotic individuals in society. So to isolate them further actually would have been just saying, there's a noose, go and hang yourself now. Our job during COVID was to pull people out of that crisis, out of that isolation. So right away I was like, I'm not saying to people stay inside. I'll wear a mask and I'll walk a distance to make sure that guy stays safe, or to make sure that lassie goes and gets her medication. So I didn't really abide, and I probably shouldn't say this actually because I run a charity, but I didn't really abide with the COVID stuff because I didn't believe in the system of it, Sean.
And plus another disclaimer, love always knows when to break the rules.
Exactly. That's why I love you, James.
Definitely not. And that's what I was going to say. I was actually going to say you probably saved a lot of people doing it, Natalie, like especially in that prison system. We talk about isolation and stuff. What's your take on COVID, Tommy?
Three things I would like to say, but before that, I would have to say, Natalie, don't worry. You're saying you shouldn't say you broke the rules and you were running a charity. Well, the bastards in number 10 were running a government and they broke the rules, so don't you worry about that, is what I would say to you about that. Three things. One is, I don't know whether the conspiracy theories have got substance to them or not. Sometimes in life you always want to say that you know the answers. Well, we don't always have the answers, so I don't know. I'm open to some of the arguments. I think it's very, very difficult to get a world conspiracy because the world's so divided.
Yeah.
So when I look at the Russias and the Chinas of the world, if it was a conspiracy, why were they involved?
That's what gets
Because
me.
so that's the sort of a counter to it being a conspiracy for me. If it had been part of the world, then it maybe been more cogent as an argument. However, I don't dismiss people if they've got some evidence, they've got some arguments. Let's listen to them. Second thing I would say is it did highlight the best and the worst. The worst was the fuckers that were telling us to do things and they were doing the opposite. And those, the Michelle Moans of the world. I can give you PP equipment. What are you talking about? You've not even got a company. I'm setting one up and I can do it. Millions we gave them. Tens of millions. They're criminals. They should be in jail. But they made money out of other people's misery. Nurses and health workers getting given PP equipment that didn't fit, that wasn't any use, but they were making millions with it. So that's the worst. The best for me was the response of the health workers, the transport workers, the retail workers, the carers, the salt of the earth, people who, like Natalie, were making sure that others were okay.
The working class.
Societal,
communitarian
belief came out during COVID. The fact we went out on a Thursday night to applaud. You know, what pissed me off is we went out on Thursday night and they fucking politicians were applauding. But as soon as COVID was over, they weren't giving them a decent wage rise. You know, that's how much it meant to them. But that brought out the best of humanity for me, that we were willing to stick together and help one another, and gave me a wee glimpse that a different society is possible. Okay. The third thing, and the most artificial, I suppose, is I fucking hate COVID because it lost Celtic the 10 in a row. If we hadn't had COVID, we'd have won 10 in a row. And that's why I hate COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to agree on that.
Amen.
So, everybody, thanks for that. When we'll try and we'll move fast on the last one, and the last one's the last topic is equality and diversity, and there's a lot of stuff. Obviously, we've touched on a lot of poverty, and that was kind of what it is, and equality and just kind of equal rights of people. And I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the world that inclusion and all this kind of stuff, and a lot of things that I don't understand, and if you don't really want to talk about it, you don't need to speak about it. But what do you think of the kind of stuff that's going on now? I'll start with you, James. What do you think of the stuff about, like, just even the stuff that's going on in schools and whatever, like inclusion and including people and different kind of LGBTQ and all this kind of stuff? Do you think it's a good thing or do you think it's a bad thing?
It's very complex. The thing about it is, for me, it's like we're on a march to try and please everybody, and you can't please everybody. And for me, like you know me, I'm speaking about include the excluded all the time. That's one of my mantras. You need to include the excluded, and the reason I say that is because the people who are massively effective across systems and services that I've seen are some of the people who have been most excluded for these systems and services. And the reason I say that is, one, a personal point is I spent my young life in contact with the social work, children and family social work. Then I was involved with the children's panel system. Then I was involved with the youth justice system, care system, then the adult prison system. And all the way through all these systems, I never met anybody who was able to look at me and say, I know what it's like to be you. I never had the felt sense once that there was another human being occupying these systems and services who knew what it was like to be me. And it wasn't until I met a guy who did know what it was like to be me, who was able to look me in the eye and say, there's a way past this. This is what I done. Because all that time I spent in these systems, they were telling me what I should do and what wasn't acceptable and how I was wrong and how they were punishing this. and and all that done was exacerbate the sense of disconnection I already had. And it wasn't until I met somebody who says to me, this is what I done. He didn't tell me what to do, he told me what he done.
Aye.
And I was able to say to myself, maybe I can do that. Maybe I can try that. And it starts that journey. And for me, for education, all the way through all these systems that deal with poverty and adversity, basically, needs to be occupied with people whose lives are relatable to the experience that the people are supporting. And that's not to say that it should exclude all the other workers who haven't got that type of lived experience. My argument is it should be 50-50. Because you don't change a culture unless you include people who are most excluded for that. It doesn't change with a strategy. You ever notice that?
Aye.
Governments are brilliant at strategies and action plans, and then it just goes on a shelf because the culture chews it up and spits it out. The only way you change a culture is by including the people who are most excluded for their services and systems. And that, for me, is what equality is about.
I think
Or should be about.
for me, I just think we've got so to a place in the. I look at the world and I just think to myself, where has happened to us? Like how have we lost? Where did we lose this humanity? But when you go to the working class level, when you always go, as Tommy was talking earlier, when you go to the working class level and you take Tommy's second point on the COVID thing, you see the best of humanity. It's always the working class who shine through and the people with that lived experience who are willing to put their self on the line when it gets tough.
Sean, I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for people like Karen McCluskey and John Carnican, who were heading up the violence reduction unit, who saw a young boy who was wanting to volunteer in a gang intervention project. It would have been easy for them to say it's too risky. He's not that far away from his cell. But they didn't. They gave me opportunity. And the more they gave me opportunity, the further and further I get away from that way of life. So I know personally it works, but it takes people with real courage, real leaders to say, Mon will take a punt on you and take you on that journey. And like John Carnican had a brilliant, he's got lots of brilliant quotes. You should actually get him on your podcast. He says to me, you should bring your whole self to work. You should bring the father, the son, the daughter, the mother. Bring it all to work. Be your authentic self at the work. And he used to say to me, you're not here because of what you've done, you're here because of who you are. It's reminding people of who you are and who you can be, and not being attached to what you think you've done or what label society's held on you because it's on a record somewhere, or because you've been in care, you think my life's adversity doesn't mean destiny.
No.
And for me, that's the way we should look at people who are living in adversity, as they're absolutely assets. Like Tommy said, that some of the most compassionate people I've ever met. No, I'm not just saying some. The most compassionate people I've met in my life have been some of the most downtrodden, wounded, dislocated and disenfranchised human beings ever. And they just seem to have this ability to get your head off the table and say, I can do this, right, we'll go, I'll get another day.
Aye. But it's interesting, Davey was talking about Malawi, right, which is one of the poorest countries in the world. And he was saying, like, I remember, Davey, you told me a story about your camera getting stolen and how quickly it was given back.
It wasn't a camera. It wasn't a camera, it was a bag of distemper. Because we were working with rebuilding schoolhouse or whatever else. We just left half a sack of distemper out in the building we were staying in, and it was nicked. Within about 3 hours, it was back. Exactly where it was taken from. That's just the jungle drums.
Yeah.
Somebody stole a bag of distemper, you better fucking bring it back quick. You're in trouble.
You're good to us.
But that's the society, that's the community creating that atmosphere. It's like, it's like the kids, the one kid that was handed over to the cops, the rest of them, but hundreds and hundreds of kids got into trouble when they went through the tribal system, talked to the chiefs, the community themselves.
Restorative justice.
Sorted it, aye. Social justice. There was no blame.
Yeah.
I remember a story. I mean, I've done, I think I've toured 4 one-man shows in prisons. There was one guy I met in, can't remember, it was Peter here or something, and he says to me, he says, Davey, I was put into care at the age of 6. From the age of 6 to the age of 16, I was systematically abused sexually, physically, emotionally and psychologically. When I got to the age of 16, the state no longer had the responsibility to look after me, so I was out in the streets. I was homeless, I lived in the streets, and I continued to be abused and beaten and all the rest of it. You know, your imagination does the rest. He said, until I got to the point when I retaliated. I hit back and somebody died. And he's now still in prison.
Yeah.
And he's not going to get out.
Mm-hmm.
That he's not the guilty one. We're the guilty one. Society's guilty.
Yeah.
He was just an innocent kid. He said, my life was over. My life was taken away from me at the age of 6. So what do we expect?
Hurt people, hurt people.
I know. I think, see, when the statistics that are starting to come out the new, I seen something that was quite, I was quite shocked by it. And obviously prison's got that kind of macho kind of thing about it. But a lot of the guys, they come through the care system and that. And these statistics were hitting. I can't even remember the report. I'll try and get it, but it was like 70% they were saying they reckon were either sexually or physically abused as a child through the system, which again would
those in prison.
And prison 70 odd percent. But obviously a lot of these people won't admit, because it's a weakness. If you go, I was a wee boy at one point that get terrorised or I get sexually abused, it's hard, especially if you're at the height of the criminal gate. It's not something that you would turn into your
But what's
pal.
that saying, Sean? Think it this way, and I talk about this all the time. I go to the gym, so I get hard skin on my hands. Why is that? Because I expose my hands to a harsh environment, so my hands need to harden themselves to protect themselves in a harsh environment. It's the same with a human being. If you're like, even Palestine, if you're bombing young people, if you're traumatising people by sexually abusing them, exposing them to violence, then they'll need to overcompensate to deal with that. And one of the biggest overcompensations is flight for your vulnerability. So you'll hide your vulnerability. So you've got young men and adults in prison who are just sitting there like, just exuding that toughness. They wear it up in their face. It's a trauma response.
Aye, definitely.
And they have to hide their vulnerability for a reason. It was trampled all there.
Mm-hmm.
And the last place they're going to get vulnerable is in a prison setting.
Right.
Because they already witness vulnerability getting trampled on, and because it's that thing I always say, trauma survivors watch your feet. They're only watching your words, so they're watching how you behave and how you interact with each other. So they're checking the environment for safety all the time. And I remember you saying once, one of the first times I ever met you, it was at you'll probably remember it better than me, but I remember you get dead honest about what was going on. And one of the things you say is, how can a prisoner get honest about his mental health when you've got prison officers belittling people for being no right in the head or blah, blah, blah? Because they see that. So the last thing they're going to do is visit vulnerability and say, I've got suicidality here, or I'm worried about what's happening back in the house, my veins are... Because they know the prison officer's just going to be like, the fuck's it going to do with me? I'll go, if you're not right in the head, or I'll start talking about you behind your back, and then somebody else hears it.
Aye.
And we're part of that problem. The system's part of that problem, because if it's localised at you, then it's you that needs to change, innit? If you're the problem, then you need to change. And for me, it's environment.
Oh, environment's everything, and obviously, Tom, you were kind of privy to a kind of maybe an elite political system as an MSP. Did you see that elitism kind of maybe saturate into being somebody that, if, like, I don't know how I'm trying to ask it. I'm probably trying to say, in that kind of that elitist thing, did you see any empathy, compassion, or was that kind of void? Was it more of a, I want to be a vote winner here?
There's 129 MSPs, and out of that 129 there were some decent human beings. Ones I didn't agree with politically, still decent enough human beings. But the majority of them, I wouldn't cross the road to say hello to them. I felt that they were there because it was a career to make money. It wasn't about changing the world or changing Scotland. It was about making money. Many of them were involved in all sorts of expenses claims, property scams. It was what they could get out of it. So that's why I hated the place. I wasn't a particularly popular individual there because I raised things which they didn't want raised. I tried to expose the property scam where we were giving MSPs money to pay for properties because they were travelling from different parts of Scotland to Edinburgh and they could purchase properties in Edinburgh. Problem was we were getting the money for them to purchase the property, but the property became theirs. And I'm saying to myself, wait a minute, we've paid them money to purchase a property that they can then sell at a later date for profit. It's just pathetic. And of course, you're no popular when you blow the whistle, because that was a kind of whistle-blowing thing today because there was loads of them in it and they didn't want me exposing it. So you come across people, some of whom are very human, very genuine, and they want to change things, and you don't maybe share their beliefs, but you can understand that they're sincere enough what they believe in. But many of them, I just didn't have time for. But in terms of the equality thing that we started on, Sean, I think we've all got to try as best we can in all of our walks of life to talk more about love than hate.
Yeah.
You know, people talk about being religious and how religion is good for you, and I often think, oh, everybody's religious, where's the love? You know, there's a song, was it Black Eyed Peas, where is the love, right?
Yeah.
I think society, we as politicians, as individuals, we've got to spread more love, more cooperation, more collaboration, more friendship. You know, it's like I talk about refugees and all you hear is people shaking their head, they're getting hussies, they're getting washing machines, and I'd rather offer a horn of friendship to somebody that's coming to my country than a fist of fury.
Yeah.
I think that's much more important because that's a human being we're talking about. Yeah. And see somebody that has served time on a boat to come here, very, very brave, very, very courageous. Give them a wee bit of support. Don't see them as an enemy. So I think that's what we as individuals have to try and do, is spread more love. And that brings you to this whole equality debate. And I hate the fact that people accuse me of being a bigot because I oppose the Gender Recognition Act. The Gender Recognition Act is a disgrace, in my opinion. The Gender Recognition Act wants to tell us that at 16 years of age, you can decide. At 16, you can decide without any intervention medically from a doctor. You can decide that even though you've been born a boy, you're now a woman and you must recognise me legally as that. And I think that goes against the Equality Act of 2010, where trans rights are embedded. So if you've went through the necessary living experience where you feel trapped, dysphoria is a reality, there's no doubt about it. If you're trapped in a body that is not yours and you have a lived experience, you've taken medical advice, you've got a doctor involved, and then you want to change your gender, it's there in the Equality Act. It protects you, gives you legal rights. Mm-hmm. But the idea that we reduce it from 18 to 16, that we reduce it from 2 years to 3 months, imposes an idea in my mind that it's like changing, I don't have any hair anymore, but you used to change your hair shed. Changing your gender's no as easy as that. Changing it's a life-changing reality. And too many people have bought into, I think, a cult and a self-identity, a belief that is now beginning to get a kickback. The CAS report, the medical report that's come out recently, shows that the medical approach has been totally and utterly inadequate, that we have treated counselling as a form of conversion therapy. People say conversion therapy and you think, oh, I'm against that. That's what they did to Alan Turing because he was gay, and one of the most intelligent men in the world, probably saved hundreds of thousands of lives, got through by cracking the code. Alan Turing, they gave him conversion therapy with electrodes. But they want to define conversion therapy as talking to your doctor. That's now conversion therapy. Talking to a doctor, how can that be conversion therapy? You've got a small group of people who are trying to tell us that anybody, whether you're born with a penis or not, you can be defined as a woman. I'm sorry, women are women, and they've fought long and hard to get the rights to be women. And we should not in any way infringe on those rights. If someone changes their gender, they become a transgender man or a transgender woman. They don't become a woman or a man, in my opinion. It's biologically impossible to do it. And I think our problem is that we've been captured by a very small group of people at the top of society, particularly the Greens and the SNP, who brought this legislation along. And then everybody else said, oh no, you can't say anything about it because you're going to be seen as a bigot. You're going to be seen as anti-trans. I fought for gay rights all my life. My sister's gay. I was the first politician, MSP, to speak at a Pride event. I absolutely wear my promotion of equal rights as a badge of honour. But I'm not going down the road of self-identity because it's not real. It is biological nonsense.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to say, I'm sorry, this is just shite. And quite frankly, that's the way I see it.
It looks into what Jordan was talking about earlier, with like 1984, and but would you feel comfortable fighting? Like, obviously you were boxing no long ago. Would you feel comfortable fighting like trans, like somebody that you knew was a lassie before?
Well, it actually happened quite recently. There was a guy on TikTok. His moniker was Sean the Sheep. So Sean used to be female and went through the transition period. And I do believe Sean was one of the people that did have body dysmorphia, did believe to be like a boy in a woman's body. And I totally support people that make that transition. He was to take part in it was one of the charity white collar boxing. See, something like the one I done, but not on the same kind of scale. And then he joined it, started the training, and then they says to him that he couldn't compete because he was a trans man. And see, to be honest, it's like, understand it's really unfair the fact they've been asked to fight and then been taken off it. But I can see when you look at sports and you'll get maybe like men that will transition to women, then they'll compete in women's sports. They've already had that. It's like, as much as Tommy says, like the biology of it, it's like you're a man, you naturally produce testosterone. You've had that advantage all your life, and then to transition, and then you're going, and especially in like combat sports where you can really hurt somebody.
It happened no long ago.
I wouldn't feel comfortable fighting somebody that had made the transition. As much as I support what they're doing, and I hope they've made it with the right reasons, they've not felt as if, because I feel as if we. The age thing as well, it's a complex issue, so I don't feel as if the transition should be an easy process for somebody. I think how impressionable young children are.
Oh, definitely.
And your like, peer groups and that. There's definitely cases where children are going to identify as an opposite gender or another gender just to fit in. It's definitely going to happen. Children are very impressionable. And as Tommy says, you're making this irreversible, life-changing surgery. Yeah. And it's like, that should be I should say it should be quite a complex process because it's a complex issue. So I don't see why the process should be easy for somebody that might be the wrong person to do it.
I totally agree, and I think that there's elements here that are outrageous, and Natalie might be able to come in this on the way that say I just dropped in Berlin tomorrow, right, and I just went, I identify as a female. There is people in Cotton Vale that are male sex offenders, which I was quite shocked when I found that out. How does that? I don't know. You might know what the prison system thinking about it. Like, what are they quite happy to go along with it?
They're clearly not. How dare we? How dare we put a man that's transitioned into a woman into a women's prison when they've already took the rights of a women away? How dare we as a society do that? How dare we install more the amount of fear that gets installed in women that have been sexually abused, especially as a young child. You're always going to be triggered for the rest of your life. You live in hypervigilance for the rest of your life. So the decisions that you make are going to deter and take you down all the wrong paths, which ultimately will take you to prison. So we say in the Scottish Prison Service, you come here and we will transform your life and unlock potential. That's their motto, right? You said it. Transform lives and unlock potential. So if I'm going in there thinking I'm going in for safety, I'm going in to be rehabilitated because I've committed a crime, and that's what the taxpayers are paying for, and then I'm putting a man that's took the rights of a woman away, but she's transformed into a woman now, I'm putting that in the same prison. How dare we? How dare we as a society allow that to happen? We're not only doing it in women's prisons, by the way, we're doing it in men's establishments.
I did, yeah.
And here's the thing, and again, I probably shouldn't say this and I'll probably get into trouble for it, but I don't care because I'll ask the whys and say what I shouldn't. Why are we allowing that to happen? They're the most manipulative people. And that's fed back to me by prison officers. They feel intimidated by these individuals, that they've learned narcissistic ways to manipulate you to where you, as a person of power, you should be getting and locking someone up and being in a position of power. Officers feel inferior because they know how to manipulate you. How dare we? How dare we do that? What makes it right for the powers above to make that decision? If you want to change your sexuality to become something else, let's build another jail. Because we shouldn't be putting them in they shouldn't even be in a men's establishment. If you're a woman, you should not be in a men's establishment, and vice versa. We need to find somewhere safe for everybody in that residential space and for you to go to. But we should absolutely not be traumatising people even more. Definitely not.
See, like 30 years ago, Tommy, Davey, if I'd said, obviously, Tommy, 30 years ago, if I'd said to you, in 30 years' time, a boy will not be a boy and a girl will not be a girl. How ridiculous would that have sounded?
But it sounds absolutely ridiculous to me now. But ironically, Sean, over the last year, 2 years, people like me have been made to feel as though we're bigots for thinking that somebody's a boy or a girl. We've no longer to refer to mummy and daddy. It's the idea that somehow or other we are in the wrong, and it's a very, very manipulative ideology. And if you go all the way back to America, where a lot of this comes from, a lot of this emanates from, you see, what is worrying for me, if we want to lower the age of consent to change your gender from 18 as it is now to 16, if we want to make it easier so that you don't have to live in your identified gender for 2 years, you just, after 3 months, get the certificate and that's it. You don't have a doctor signing a form any longer. You don't have to speak to a doctor. No medical intervention at all. That's what the Gender Recognition Act is all about. Making it easier to take a very, very important decision in your life. 16, right? Yeah. Well, the thin end of the wedge is, if you can change your gender at 16, oh, come on, if you can change your gender, if you're mature enough to change your gender, why do you need to be 16 to decide about sex? Well, why? Surely the age of consent should be lowered now. Maybe make it 14 or 13, because you're mature enough at 16 to change your gender. Surely you're mature enough at 14 to decide whether you have sex with somebody. That's the worrying thing for me, that some of the right-wing manipulative groups that are behind this whole gender ideology, it is the thin end of the wedge, and people have to make a stand, and people who have made a stand on women's rights point of view. Women's rights have been fought for long and bloody hard. How dare somebody to come along and say, see those single-sex spaces that you fought for? See the right to go to a rape counsellor and demand that it's a woman that actually deals with you. Those are hard-won rights.
Yeah.
And then somebody comes along and says, oh no, sorry, this person's transgender. You need to accept it, even though it's a man with a pair of hairy balls. They're actually a woman. You have to just accept that. I'm sorry, no, it's no acceptable.
There's also, Tommy, the neuroscience is telling us that the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of the human brain, doesn't fully develop until you're 25. So we're not even following the neuroscience
Absolutely.
and the evidence, and we're allowing people to accelerate a process that took 2 years down to 3 months. So there's no comprehensive assessment on whether the individual's making a right decision, or is it an act of rebellion, or is it, like, there's so many variables and complexities to it. It's like, and once that's done, it can't be reversed.
Of course it is.
I think
can't
there's
be
already
reversed.
been a couple of cases, James, where people have regretted.
Yeah.
Well, there's now lawsuits in America getting taking place. Several lawsuits where young women are taking the authorities to court because they've lost their breasts because they were put on the adolescence treatment, and the breasts cut off, right? But they did it when they were 14, because in some states in America it's no 16, it's 14.
Yeah.
Right? And the idea that we don't make a stand against that. See if there was no recognition of trans rights, I would be at the top of the queue saying, no, look, some people deserve rights. It's there in the Equality Act. It's black and white. It's not as if we are trying to give someone rights that they don't already have. The right exists. What some people are saying is, no, but we should make it a lot easier. Well, I disagree. I don't think we should make it a lot easier. I think it's such an enormous decision in your life. We give counselling, we give support, but we make sure that person who's taking that decision is taking it in an informed way. Not someone that's 16, well, we're all teddies and posers and whatever when we were young.
Yeah.
How many things did we all believe in with 16? I'm sorry, I wasn't mature enough at 16 to make a decision like that in my life.
I think everybody deserves rights. We all know that. We all agree with that everybody deserves rights. Equality is a massive thing that everybody... And we're talking about such a small minority of the population, and the amount of space it's getting for such a small minority. I don't know. And I think you've got to start looking at that other side where Tommy's talking about why it's coming in and but again, that's all. But we're coming up to the end of the podcast, right? And I just want to thank everybody. It's been an amazing conversation, honestly. I've absolutely loved it. But I just want to give everybody a wee final kind of say what they're on their preferred topic, whatever they want. So we'll start with you, James. Just a wee kind of final message for the viewers.
It's been an education just listening to everybody, and thanks for doing me today, Sean. Like, there was no I've got special interests in different subjects, and I'll always be a massive advocate for people looking at the trauma in our culture, because I believe it's the root cause of most of the stuff we're talking about. Even when you talk about the gender stuff, how many of these men have got unresolved trauma and they're making decisions based on that, and they're not getting a chance to fulfil the levels of maturation you can get to, and the healing process that allows you to make better decisions in your life. And I don't think we as a society know enough about that, and I think people are scared to talk about trauma as well, because they think it's this big complex issue. They don't know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. Whereas I do. I know what to do with it. I know what works. I know what doesn't work. But it takes everybody. It's a concerted effort. And I think when you create a space like this, then it empowers people to recognise that their voices get depth and weight, and it can influence. And then it's that thing about having a sense of contribution. I can do this bit here. Mm-hmm. And if people can get that sense of empowerment, they know they can make a wee change here. Because if you're looking at it globally or politically, it's too big. It's too big for you to fix, and that throws you into a state of powerlessness and helplessness. But right here, right now, I don't feel powerless, because I know I'm getting to contribute in a small way, and that has ripple effects.
Definitely. Well, cheers, James. Natalie, final message?
Just thank you, Sean. I didn't I woke up this morning, I didn't want to come here actually because I knew that I was going to be, I feel very intimidated, and I speak to James about this actually. I feel intimidated when I'm in a room with predominantly men, and ironically I work with men, but it's a power imbalance thing, and I hate that feeling of feeling unequal in a room. Because I start to feel inferior, and Tommy's a politician and Davey's an actor, but the reality is everything that I've done for the past 10 years is to be a voice for people that don't have any. And it took me a long, long time, just like James, to find my own voice and to believe that I was able to ask the whys and not sitting in a corner and being like, no, do you know what? I support, 480 people throughout 3 prison establishments. You're damn right I'm going to have a voice, and I'm going to ask the questions that they don't get to ask, and I'm going to make the votes that they don't get to vote for, and I'm going to read the letters that they don't get to read out. And it doesn't matter if I feel inferior, because the bottom line is I've came here just like James. I've been educated in subjects that I might not know anything about, or I know a wee bit more information that I'll go and research now. And hopefully you get to meet friends, don't you? And we talk about that, like the Black Eyed Peas, where is the love?
Definitely.
Like, it takes rooms like this to change environments in countries like we're living in, because we need to have love will always override hate. It's like James will always say to me, power and force. And I always say, listen, hen, you just need to stay in power, because your power will overtake the force. Mm-hmm. The force is the systems, the prisons, the judges, the courts. But if I just stay in power, then I'm not powerless anymore, and I keep my voice. So, no, thank you for inviting us on to speak about prison reform, because it's important to me, and I like to learn from other people so that I can help change the narrative for Scotland and wider. So, thank you.
No, brilliant. Thanks, Natalie. Jordan, big man.
So I've really enjoyed being a part of the panel, man. I love everybody's input. I've learned quite a lot, man. And I've tried to provide as much value as I possibly could. There was certain topics, like if I go back to the politics thing, and Tommy talking about having like a kind of like a more involvement kind of thing. Obviously I'm paraphrasing, but just try to echo your words, you know what I mean? Very articulate guy, so it's hard for me to remember everything you said. But see, for me, I'm constantly juggling between right now. It's only recently I'm starting to realise how many people actually listen to what I say, and I feel as if I've lived quite a life where I've not felt listened to for a lot of my life. And that's through my parents. Like, just I think it's an attention thing, and I think I'm still trying to work through these things and identify and figure it out what makes me behave the way I behave, and it's still a learning process. Plus, I'm trying to navigate a point where I have got a public platform. I have got quite a large number of people that are watching it, so I'm trying to juggle it between artistic integrity, where I create stuff that is personal to me without taking the audience into consideration. There's a great producer called Rick Rubin, and his theory is the audience should come last in any creative endeavour, because if you suddenly think about the audience, it loses what makes it art. But I'm also trying to be aware of the fact that I do have a public platform. I'm not trying to buy into all the bullshit and the stuff, and I don't want to give people, I don't want to tell people stuff that I don't believe in. And right now, when we go back to politics, I genuinely don't know what to believe in. It's like Tom was saying before, it was left and right. There was a clear divide. Nowadays, what people are saying, what a lot of people are saying about Labour, it's just the Tories wrapped in red. And for what I've seen, I don't see, it's not a case I don't want to vote. It's like, I don't know who to vote for. And there's no clear standout person for me to vote for. So I'm kind of like that. It's just there's so much doubt and confusion that I've got a lot of my energy focused in certain areas in my life. I just feel as if right now to focus my energy in that area, it's like it's a lost cause for me. And a guy actually asked me to share something. This guy had been contacting me and he wanted me to share a video because he'd done an interview and it was about trans men getting access to women's bathrooms and that, and it was something like he was against it. And I did agree with his point, but I was like, look mate, I don't want to make my platform about politics. I just really don't. I just want to stay away from that side of things, because for that way it's like we're highlighting an issue, or it's like it is an issue, but we're going down it into a realm where it's so complex, and it's like, what do you actually solve? That's the feeling I've got, and I'd rather try and help people through positivity, ways to manage your own life, manage your emotions, and if you've fell into crime or addiction, there's ways out it, man. But I just felt as if politics. I just don't know. It was like uncharted terrain for me, and it's like venturing into the desert with that much water on you. Not I'm talking about. That's what I feel for me. And I'm like, you know what? I'll just focus on what I know and stick with what I know and what I believe in, and just try and preach what I believe in. So, I'm just going to continue to preach what I believe in.
Brilliant. Cheers, Jordan. Davey.
I love Native American philosophy, and the Sioux Nation have a proverb that says, "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children."
Yeah.
That is one of the most profound statements I've ever heard in my life. So I've got 3 sons, I've got 4 grandkids, I'm on my deathbed, and I'm handing back the world to them and say, sorry, it's a pile of shite. I was too busy watching X Factor, too busy watching football. We can't do it. We've got to the point where we all have to engage with the type of world we want to live in, the type of society we want to live in. Yeah. So just be active.
Cheers, Davey. Yeah. Tommy.
Listen, it's been a great education. I've learned from every one of the contributors today. It's been really, really uplifting. And I've listened very, very intently to you, and I'm just dead happy to have been involved. So, Sean, thanks for bringing it together, mate. We're probably, known social media as it is, we've probably went on too long to keep people's attention, because everybody's got that 2 minutes, and if you don't catch it, then you've had it. So I just want to thank everybody for inviting us along and for being trustworthy enough to allow me to listen to what you've got to say. And Davey finished with a wee adage there. I always think we have to say to people, spread the love, and the only time you look down on somebody is to help them up. Yeah. It's the only time you look down on somebody, because we're all one part. We're no different races, we're no different religions, we're no different cultures. We're part of one race, and it's the human race, and we've got to understand that.
Yeah.
Aye, the world needs healing. But listen, thank you very much. I can't thank you enough for coming along, and hopefully this will be first of a few panels. And again, thank you for coming along. Cheers.